It's why
Unfortunately,
you know
sorry, go
being under the purview of Nurgle would not be good for me. I don't think.
on.
Because he's all
I,
sort of fraternal and familial, and they all gather together, don't they? And it's like, oh no,
yeah, there's like,
no, go
yeah,
away, all of you,
yeah.
leave me alone.
Yeah, there's this kind of cloyingness. It's like too much love almost.
Yeah, yeah,
um,
that's kind of the thing, though, isn't it? That's
yeah,
kind of the
yeah,
point. It's like
yeah.
I remember, like the old, the old Realms of Chaos books.
Mm,
They
mm,
describe Nurgle's love in a very specific way, which is it's the love of an overbearing and abusive mother,
mm.
which is really interesting,
No,
right?
that's really interesting because you don't often hear the sort of feminine aspects of Nurgle very much
No,
these
but it is coming
days.
out more. It is
Mm,
coming out
mm,
more. There's the new Slaves to Darkness book
mm,
for Age of Sigmar.
mm,
It describes like the different aspects of Nurgle that are worshipped throughout the mortal realms, and one of them is a maternal figure.
mm, mm,
But one of Khorne's is actually
mm,
bizarrely as well, like the mother of blood.
mm.
Really interesting, and I
No,
like that.
I
Really
really
like that.
like that they're playing into like the idea of all. I mean, I don't know about Zinch there because he seems to be missed out, but perhaps even with him, like the idea of them sort of being all androgynous figures, all having like these sort of like very Jungian, this sort of can't remember the Jungian phrases, but like
Mm.
anima and animus or something like that. But yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, that kind of like both of the sort of gendered archetypes playing
Mm.
simultaneously because that's always obviously been there in Slaanesh. Like
Well,
that's very
absolutely, yeah. I mean, more generally in the Chaos Powers, themselves by their very
Mm,
natures,
mm,
right? Because they are so various and so
mm,
metamorphic in the
mm.
way they're worshipped. Zeech obviously has just
Yeah,
it doesn't
yeah,
mean anything. I mean, even
yeah.
like the notion of applying pronouns of any kind, Zeech is like what would you? It's a phenomena, isn't it? Zeech is
Yeah,
like
yeah,
the
yeah.
closest to being like a Lovecraftian phenomena.
Mm,
He's
mm.
Azathoth, isn't he? Zeech is
Yeah, yeah.
Azathoth, really.
It's changeability itself personified. So it like Zinch is like a kind of like just impossible to grasp. Like if you were going to
Yes.
apply pronouns, you'd probably want like a different pronoun every time you refer to
Yeah.
Zinch. Like
I mean, there is. I mean, did you read the Thousand Suns Codex from the last edition of Warhammer 40,000?
I didn't, but I heard a lot about it, and I heard some really
So
interesting
good,
reviews.
so good.
Yeah.
There is because the Thousand Sons are broken up into various cults. There are nine,
Mm,
obviously,
mm,
all of which represent a different aspect of Zeech. So there's
mm,
the cult of change, the cult of magic, the cult
mm,
of knowledge. One of the most interesting entries was the cult of duplicity, and
mm,
the character that it describes is a character whose name changes every time it's spoken or written. So the
mm.
description of the character, I thought it was misprinted when I first read it, but no, every time it's printed, it's different. I thought
That's
that was really
brilliant. That's
right.
absolutely brilliant.
I
That
thought
is
that was
really,
just,
yeah, yeah.
they're going
I,
so deep at the moment into
mm,
stuff like
mm,
that, and I love the fact that because now these legions have their own books, they're not
mm.
sort of rolled into the core Chaos Space.
Yeah, yeah,
They can
yeah.
go that far with them. It's
Mm.
wonderful stuff.
I have always felt the more Chaos gets close to Undivided, the less interesting it generally
Yeah.
is. Like there
Them,
is interesting stuff there. There's
yeah,
like individual demons who are trying to
yeah.
like become their own gods, and that's kind of interesting.
Baylor and the
Yeah,
likes. Yeah, they're fun. They're fun.
yeah,
I think
yeah.
with the Undivided book, which is just like now it's the core Heretic Astartes book, isn't it? The Chaos Space Marine book. The onus and the emphasis shifts quite dramatically from the Chaos Powers themselves to the legions. That's where all the really interesting stuff is happening. So of course you've got the Black Legion, who are the kind of prime Chaos Space Marine Legion. You've got Abaddon, who's become a far more interesting character in recent editions. You've got Fabius Bile, who's great anyway. I mean, Fabius is awesome and always has been. But you've also got like the Word Bearers, who are wonderful, the Iron Warriors, the Alpha Legion, all of whom have been really deepened and complexified in recent years thanks to the books that have been released on them.
How much did they? Because with the Alpha Legion, they're kind of. I always see them as like the inverse of the Dark Angels. In that, with the Dark Angels, they're kind of loyalists with like this hint of heresy, whereas the Alpha Legion, they're kind of heretics with this
with
hint
a
of
hint of
loyalism.
loyalty. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's where they've gone with them. They've made them much more oblique and esoteric these days. So exactly what they're doing and what their agendas and motivations are impossible to discern, because that's how they like it. That's what they want, you know. So the whole thing with the Alpha Legion is obliqueness. Whatever is written or recorded about them is likely a lie. There was like in the original background for the Alpha Legion, they were the last Legion established. They were the 20th Legion, so the last one established, and their Primarch Alfarius was the last one discovered. However, there was a book released by the Black Library recently which actually demonstrated that that's all a lie. It's all a complete deception, masterminded by Alfarius and the Emperor, interestingly. Alfarius was the first Primarch rediscovered. He was not very far from Terra, apparently. He was the very first Primarch rediscovered, and he was the first to have his Legion established. But they put about this story to further conceal what the Alpha Legion are actually doing, because that was their purpose. Their whole thing during the Great Crusade was they were supposed to infiltrate the other legions and keep an eye on them. Basically,
that's
from within.
really interesting. Yeah. Oh, that
And
gives, that's yeah.
Even now, it's hard to say quite what they're doing and why.
I mean, it'd be fascinating if they started like hinting that they're still kind of operating within all the other legions,
which they probably are. I mean,
that seems like the obvious takeaway from that being their purpose. That they're that they're
not
still
just the Chaos ones either.
Yeah,
they likely have agents in the Loyalist chapters as well, which is really distressing.
Yes. No, I imagine Zinj really enjoys them and the Dark Angels for all of these reasons.
Very much. Yes, I think he's definitely got multiple eyes on both of them. Quite frankly, did you see the return? We had the Lion return recently.
Yes.
Woof.
Lionel.
Wow. Woof. What a beautiful model. I mean, I like Robotech fine. Robotech's great fun, but the Lion has always been one of my favorites of the Loyalist, quote unquote, Loyalist Primarchs. And they've done a smashing
I really
job.
like him.
I mean,
wow. I saw some people. I mean, there's always like annoying sides of the fandom. But I saw some people complaining about him being aged, which just like is so much a part of what makes the model cool. Like this kind of sense of his like being ancient. I adore all of the models they've done of the Primarchs and the Primarch demons. I think they've just got them.
They've knocked them out of the park, haven't they? Every single time. I mean, I was worried about Angron, because he's hard to make interesting aesthetically, because he's very much a classical demon. He looks like a bloodthirster. He looks like a big bloodthirster. And somehow they've just got it bang on. They've got it right. There's something about that miniature that just like Mortarion, like Magnus, just exudes everything that he is supposed to be. I just love it. I particularly like the detail of him having the butcher's nails still coming out of his head like a mane. It's just beautiful. He's a beast as well.
Very clever. It's very clever. I mean, he should be the kind of more sort of character in terms of the rules that just goes through everything else like it's nothing. Like
that's exactly what he is. He's very simple. He's not like, say, Magnus or Mortarion, where you have to kind of think about how you deploy them or what you do with them. You put him on the table and you chuck him. You literally chuck the model, basically. They may as well say in the rules, you throw the model and whatever it knocks over dies,
The problem with Mortarion in terms of fielding him has always been that he's this like target. I mean, I haven't actually played with Magnus, so it's probably much the same. He's this huge target, so obviously like if you field him, and especially if the enemy is like something like Imperial Guard would be like the worst if they've got lots of artillery. Because in the first turn, they'll just be like, turn all of the artillery on that.
That was exactly the problem. That was it. Back in 9th there, that was really the problem with the Primarchs. They were great, they were fun, but nobody really fielded them. Because there was no point. They would, as you say, what would happen is you couldn't obscure them because they were too big. So all of the biggest guns would be turned on them in turn 1 and they would get vaporized almost immediately. They fixed that in 10th ed, which is really lovely. Oh, yes.
I haven't read enough to sort of, but that's good to hear. Have they managed that? Have they
It's just in the base rules, really. So they're now, because of the way the rules work, they can be obscured by terrain. So that's really useful. That's really useful. But also, they are just very, very, very nasty. They've upped their toughness. They've upped their wounds. They've got better armor saves. They've got better general protection. So whereas before, back in 9th ed, you wouldn't really see that many lists with, say, Magnus. And even when he was there, he was kind of like a tax. He was there because of the rule of cool and nothing else.
Yeah.
Now with 10th ed, I haven't yet seen a Thousand Sons list that doesn't include him.
Oh, that's fantastic. That's really
because he's awesome. In fact,
yeah.
Magnus is probably the best of them. In terms of rules, he's probably the best, simply because he's the others are very much you chuck them at the enemy and everything dies. That's what they do.
Yeah.
Magnus is kind of like a Swiss Army knife. Because he's got so many psychic powers and rules and weird, abstruse things that he can do.
He gives more versatility to the army.
Absolutely.
I mean, in that way, he functions a bit like Rabute, I gather, because Rabute has a lot of like buff stuff.
Yes.
Very
I mean,
there's stuff like that. I vaguely recall with Mortarion, in that he fights well as a part of a horde. So if you're chucking him against somebody, it's good to have him like surrounded by lots and lots of Nurgle sort of auxiliary stuff. But he is still a brute force character. Like, that is basically how he functions.
Very much. But once again, I mean, now he's got these, what they've done with the Primarchs in particular, they've done it with most of the big special characters in 10th ed, but what they've done with the Primarchs in particular is they've tried to make them more like force multipliers. So all of them have like sets of special rules that they can activate at particular phases that do particular things. They're aura abilities, effectively. But because in 10th ed, aura abilities are actually really rare, unlike in 9th and 8th. Now, most characters don't have aura abilities at all. They give special rules to units that they join, which is a very different dynamic. Whereas your Primarch level characters, they can float around and give their abilities to units within range, which is really useful. I mean, like, wow, is that useful? I think Robite is really good with that. Robite has some of the best force multiplier abilities, but one of the best ones is Abaddon. By a significant margin. I mean, he gives, because of the way the marks of chaos work and the way whenever a character joins a unit now, they give that unit all of the keywords that they have. And Abaddon happens to have all of the marks of chaos, which gives him the keywords of those marks. So fantastic. When he joins a unit, they get all the marks of chaos too.
And that's pretty amazing.
Right? Yeah. Suddenly, you've got a Terminator unit. Terminators, by the way, are king in 10th ed. For some reason, they've really gone nuts with Terminators. The big box set that came out, Leviathan, full of Terminators.
It's really nice.
They've done the same for the Chaos Terminators. They're brilliant now. They've upped their toughness. They've got better invulnerable saves. They all have bespoke special rules. They're really wonderful. So putting Abaddon in a unit of Chaos Terminators that gives them all of the marks, plus all of the other aura abilities that he's got, plus whatever upgrades they've taken, you've got a nasty core to your army there.
That is, definitely. That's quite frightening.
It's good fun, right?
I have lost a little bit of track. I had an idea a while ago because I ridiculously I still have the previous box set. I can't remember what it's called, but the one with the Necrons in.
You know what, I do too.
Completely unput together. I'm not sure if I'll get Leviathan or not, and I'm very tempted, but
it's on its way.
There you go. But I do have enough models to put together a Space Marine Legion, so I was going to do a trans Space Marine Legion with the colors, which is just fun and And I mean, the lore about it kind of writes itself because there's all of this stupid fan debate about whether or not they can be femme Space Marines. I just like sidestep it, like they can if they want to be. So I was gonna have it like be like a kind of conglomerate chapter of like Space Marines who have left other chapters to be trans in this chapter as a kind of sort of like It'll be fun, and the trans colors are simple enough because some of the Pride flag colors are
a bit garish. It would be
yes, they're garish,
Yeah.
or they clash. Like they're just like not colors that actually really go together. I mean, like I'm never really sure. The idea behind the pan flag is interesting in that the colors overlap and they create the colors that they would if they merge them. I'm not actually sure it's a very visually good flag. Like the colors are just a bit not working for me. But like the trans colors, because it's just blue, pink, and white, and those all work.
It kind of works. They work together, and it would work on in 3 dimensions on a model as well. It would actually look rather nice. I'm sure I saw someone do something like that as an experiment.
I'm sure it's been done. I mean,
and it looked good. It looks good, It does remind me of like the sort of older Emperor's Children colors, because they were very similar. That sort of. It was pink married to darker colors that worked beautifully. I mean, really, really well.
I mean, I think pink is actually very versatile. It's obviously not used very much in among Space Marines.
No, it's almost Slaanesh exclusive. I think. I struggle to think of like loyalist chapters. That I'm sure there must be, because there's thousands of them, aren't there? So there must be somewhere out there.
I'm just looking it up actually now because I'm just really curious. Loyalist Space Marines.
As I said, several renegade chapters that use it. Most of them derived from the Emperor's Children that use it. I think there's a chapter called the Sons of Perfection or something like that use it, that are really quite nasty and beautiful looking.
Actually, people. I'm just looking at like a thread, and people aren't coming up with and people are coming up with their own, obviously. But there's some of which are very fun. There's like Barbie pink Space Marines, which is really fun.
Well, I had the idea of doing mine, the ones that are coming in the Leviathan box, because I've never really sat down and done a loyalist chapter before. I've always erred on the side of the Chaos Marines, the spiky Marines with the mutations and everything, obviously. But I was thinking of doing them in Rust. I thought that'd be quite nice, painting them all in Rust, maybe with bone helmets or something.
That's cool.
Calling them the Abandoned or something like that. So they have some background whereby they're very mysterious and nobody knows quite where they come from. And they all have helmets. Every single one of them is going to be helmeted, so you can't see what's going on inside.
No, absolutely. That sounds. I love the idea of doing sort of things as Rust. I mean, it's one of the reasons why I like playing with the Nurgle faction, because you can just really muck them up and they still look excellent.
It's fun, isn't it? I mean, Nurgle I always advise to newer players, because it's they're often a very friendly starter army, because they're just so good. They're so tough on the battlefield. But also, painting them, you don't have to be. It's not like painting Eldari or one of the neater armies out there. You can use lots of really cool, fun techniques that are quite rough, really, and it works gorgeous. In fact, personally, I kind of prefer Nurgle miniatures when they're like that. If
they're too clean, it looks wrong. I mean, I have seen some people do quite clever things where they will paint them very clean, but then where the details of the model are corrupted, there'll just be like an explosion of like gank and muck and stuff. And then that's, obviously to create a contrast. So there's a sense of like what they were being corrupted. And that takes a bit more skill than I necessarily have in terms of painting. But they look. I mean, I'm very proud of my little Nurgle army. I don't play with it very much, but it is just really fun to look at. And my Mortarion is probably one of my favorite. I mean, if not my favorite model ever, certainly way up there.
Oh, I think they've knocked it out of the park with the Death Guard models. I really do. I mean, it's horses for courses. Some people find them like over sculpted and over detailed, but for my money, that's what I like from Chaos. I like to see that these creatures have been so removed from what they were, so corrupt and perverted, that they don't necessarily even resemble Space Marines anymore. I kind of love that.
if you want clean models, then you're just looking in the wrong place.
Definitely.
Chaos,
Definitely.
like, yeah, it's just not that. That's. I mean, to be honest, that's also to some extent just true of Space Marines in general. They're clunky, overly ornate.
Yep.
You know, yeah, they're not like. You can do clean looking Space Marines. You can do sort of more sort of stormtroopery aesthetics.
Yeah, in the classic
Marines,
style.
yeah, but I think Space Marines generally look best when they've got that more gothic feel to them.
Yep, me too.
They're just way more interesting.
It's that sort of John Blanche aesthetic, isn't it? You know, where everything is like so incredibly detailed. It's almost impossible to see what's going on, right? I love that. That's something that kind of aesthetic is something that really appeals to me in the Warhammer 40,000 universe.
Yeah.
Those wonderful pieces of artwork where you can't even make out what the machines or the mechanisms are, or where machine begins and anatomy ends, you know?
And it goes back like to the Rogue Trader kind of like grimdark days, I think, where like things were just a bit more muddled and busy and confused. And that whole like 1980s slightly punky geek aesthetic.
Yeah,
which of course you get elsewhere. You get it in like Judge Dredd, for example.
Of course, 2000 AD.
Everything in 2000 AD has that kind of and I just appreciate. I think Games Workshop are leaning back more into that.
Definitely.
And I really appreciate that. And I even in some of their narrative pictures, I recently listened to the audiobook of Ghazghkull Thraka, Prophet of Warg.
It's just great fun.
Absolutely amazing. Like there's so much. I mean, it feels very. I mean, you I just brought up Space 2000 AD, but like it feels very of that ilk. Like it feels very like one of those comics.
Doesn't it? It's got that wonderful sort of like gallows humor that's running underneath that undercurrent of sarcasm, which I really like.
Yeah, no, it's just brilliant. I mean, there's so much, and I love it. I love it when the Space Wolf gets very angry about the orcs not referring to Ghazghkull as he, because Ghazghkull has to be a he.
Right.
And then like one of the orcs is like apparently a bit of a connoisseur of like this concept of gender amongst humans and finds it to be absolutely hilarious. And is like sort of anthropologically studied human notions of gender as a joke.
Right.
Because of course they find it completely incomprehensible and don't understand any of it. It's just, I mean, it's obviously like obviously the writer is sort of like wryly commenting on like, you know, present day political stuff of, you know, transgender people being more visible, etc. But like doing it through this alien means in this highly comedic way. It's just so well done.
And it's very good, I've got to say. And I love the fact that it's applied to Ghazghkull, you know, who is, like, on the face of it, one of the most hyper-masculine entities in the 40k universe, right?
It's just, like, all he is just sort of, like, full-throttle masculinity and violence just thrown at everything. Like, like, it's... Especially in the book, like they lean into that heavily. I mean, Ghazghkull is. I get one of the reasons why. Is it Makari? Is the
Makari?
I mean, one of the reasons why Makari is so necessary as a narrative device is because Ghazghkull is just like not really a narrative being. He's just this wrecking ball force of nature that has like there's very little dimensions there. And I like how all the other orcs that are involved in Ghazghkull and involved in his creation and maintenance are kind of aware of that, almost like it's a kind of joke. Like, Ghazghkull is kind of not even that important. He's just a kind of totemic force for orcness. Like, it's really good.
I love that. Yeah, I love that element of it. It's almost like, he's almost incidental to his own story, isn't he? He's like a force of nature.
Exactly.
You get a very similar dynamic, interestingly, with Angron whenever he turns up in the fiction, and it is actually specifically made a muchness of in the fiction the fact that when the followers of Khorne and World Eaters gather wherever Angron turns up, they know, a lot of them are aware of the fact that he is mindless, you know, that he is he is not like even the other demon Primarchs, who are to a degree aware of themselves and are considered and actually have plans and schemes and whatnot. He does not.
Yeah, he's just an animalistic force of violence, and that's
he
it. Yeah,
is like anger and violence made manifest. I mean, did you see the World Eaters obviously got their first codex recently?
Yeah, I did see that. Yeah,
which is wow. I mean, how long have people been waiting for that? That's a marker. That is just something special.
No, and it changes the nature of chaos. I think to start introducing these new dimensions to it. That it's really good to see.
I love it. I'm very happy, and what I loved reading it was how deep they went into the background with him. Like Angron is, as you say, he's like this avatar of rage and fury and loathing, and much of that rage and loathing, the book points out, is aimed at himself. That's where he derives a lot of his power from, because he is the most perpetually defeated being in the universe. He has always been a slave. Always. He was a slave to the High Riders on Nuceria, where he fell when he was a mortal Primarch. He became a slave to the Emperor in the aftermath, and then he became a slave to Khorne. And now, of course, he is the ultimate slave, because he can't. Even death isn't any release.
I really like the satirical element of that, of like the idea of violence not as a force of power, but as a force of impotency. Like there's actually a lot going on with the chaos that I think people sort of glide over, and I'm really glad that Games Workshop are bringing out those nuances in a new way. I mean, especially even with Khorne, because he's been the least nuanced of the chaos forces.
I think it's very difficult, isn't it, with Khorne, and this is the thing with Angron, to be honest. He was my least favorite of the Chaos Primarchs up to a particular point, because he was just so simple, he's so narrow. There wasn't really anything going on that hooked me in. But with the way he's been rewritten in recent years, largely thanks to Aaron Dembski-Bowden, one of the Black Library writers, and the way he's being portrayed now, I think he's really interesting and is psychologically complex and oddly sympathetic. Because he is right. He is right. He's been a victim his whole life, and he's had no say in it. Like, no say. He has been damned from the moment he crawled out of his drop pod on Nuceria. He's had no choice in the matter. And he says it. He actually, in one of Aaron Dembski-Bowden's books, I think it's in the book Betrayer, which is one of the Horus Heresy books, it's before Angron becomes the Demon Primarch. He's fighting with Robotay. He's fighting with Robotay on the ashes of Nuceria, because he's gone back and just reduced it to wasteland, and he says to Robotay, Robotay is being very high and mighty and saying, "Oh, how could you betray our father? How could you betray the Imperium?" Blah blah blah. And Angron is like, hang on, little prince. You fell on a planet of princes. You were educated in one of the most advanced and cultivated human civilizations that has ever been, right? In the history of the species. I was taken and mutilated and made into a slave when I was, before I was even sentient. That happened to me. I had no chance. I was always going to be this. You have no place, no platform to lecture me.
I like that commentary in Robotay as well, because he is like naive innocence personified, and it's kind of the sinister side of that kind of self-righteousness, which I think ultimately is his undoing. Because
absolutely, I mean, he's an idealist, isn't he? The problem with Robotay is, because he is a living ideal, he wants everything else to be idealized. He's a utopian, isn't he? I mean, he is probably one of the most utopian of the Primarchs, and so with him operating now, 10,000 years after the fact, where everything has failed, everything. His father's entire project has become the exact opposite of everything he purportedly intended it to be. He's in a real state. I mean, it's something that makes Robotay, that tension between him and the Imperium, his father, and the galaxy at large, is one of the more interesting narrative tensions.
It's interesting bringing back Lionel in that he's like the ultimate realist. Like he just
Yeah.
accepts. I mean, in all of the enigma and mystery that he wraps around himself, like he is just brutally self-honest about those circumstances. So he, in a way, is like the exact opposite in terms of the loyalist Primarchs.
And it's good. I mean, very cleverly, what they've done is kept them apart thus far. There is, I have no doubt, what is going to happen. Probably sometime in 10th Ed, actually, there is going to be a campaign or a narrative thrust where they do come together, and I don't necessarily know whether it's going to be as allies either. The way there is a book which is actually very, very good, but was released alongside Lionel Johnson's release, and in that, Lionel is being told what's happened to the Imperium, and he's told that Robotay is the one who's been resurrected and is leading it, and his reaction is, "Oh, for God's sake, why did it have to be him?" He actually says, "Why did it have to be him? Why couldn't it have been Sanguinius? Why couldn't it have been even Rogel? You know, he would have even had Rogel over Robotay."
When Lionel is praising Rogel over you, things are pretty bad.
Right. And that's really fascinating to me. Yeah. And it looks like what's happening is the Lion is pursuing his own agenda. He's carving his own path, and I think it's exactly what you were saying. It's because he is not the idealist that Robotay is. I don't think the Lion has looked at the Imperium through the eyes of his sons, obviously, and has said, "You know what? It's not worth it. It's not worth saving. We're going to have to make something new here."
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense for him in a way that, like, the tragedy of Robotay is he can't give up. He just can't. It's like not even in his makeup that he could. It's interesting thinking about the other loyalists who could come back into that situation as well. I mean, I am fairly confident that the next one to come back, I mean, I might be way off, but I'm fairly confident the next loyalist to come back will be Lyman Russ. Because it just seems the obvious next one.
If you've done the Lion, you've got to have. I mean, that would be the most obvious to do. Wouldn't it? Lyman Russ would be the one to do. I mean, there's ways of getting them all back. Obviously, even the dead ones. There's always ways in this universe of getting.
There
them
is. Back. I'm very cautious about bringing back Sanguinius because I just feel like it would do potentially irreparable harm to the Blood Angels to bring back Sanguinius.
In terms of their background, like their entire motive force, by bringing Sanguinius back, you get rid of it. I mean, there are ways around. They could bring him back, not as Sanguinius, but as a manifestation.
That's what I was thinking, because they've already got, what's the figure? The
Sanguinor. Yeah,
the Sanguinor, yeah. And I wonder if they could bring back like a more potent version of, I mean, because Sanguinor is just like, I can't remember her name, but Celeste, is it?
That's a Celestine,
Yeah, Celestine, her, and the Legion of the Damned are all very clearly the Emperor's demons, to put it very bluntly. Like, he's manifesting them from the warp in the same way that Khorne would manifest a Bloodthirster.
Exactly that, right.
What he's doing. And obviously with the Blood Angels, like, that's the Sanguinor is like a sort of potent representation of their rage mixed up with their feelings of their Primarch. So you could bring out a kind of Primarch level Sanguinor type force.
Yeah, quite easily.
And that
Essentially
would be really
a demon.
Interesting.
It's essentially a demon, isn't it? And
that would be fascinating if they leaned into that and actually made it huge, like Bloodthirster sort of scale.
So effectively a loyalist demon Primarch.
Yeah, that would be really cool.
I'm so into that. I mean,
I would definitely be into that. That would just like immediately, because I could imagine like in the face of that, like the reactions to the other loyalists would be fascinating. I mean, obviously, like Lionel would be immediately like, "This is fine, don't care.
Yeah.
It's fighting on my side, whatever."
Robotay, on the other hand,
Robotay would be like, what the fuck? Like, absolutely torn. Like,
you can see a lot of like, "You are not my brother" stuff, can't you? It should be. I mean, that's always fun, right? That's always fun, and that ambiguity as well. That ambiguity of the whatever the demon is. Well, it's like, well, am I or aren't I? It's hard to say. You know, I'm everything he could have been.
Yeah, I mean, that would be really. I actually, that whole thing we just sketched might not happen exactly as we just said, but that would be very cool.
I'd be up for it.
Yeah, I mean, I'd be really interested to see how they navigate. I mean, so the Space Wolves. I have a very love-hate relationship with, in that they are kind of just basically Viking fascists who like burning books, but they are also kind of fascinating Viking fascists who like burning books, and like it's really hard to predict what way Leman Russ goes in all of this, because his whole thing of being just like the loyal dog of the Empire. Like it kind of pushes him both. He's more realistic than Rabute, but he's also more loyalist than Lionel. So he's very torn between those two perspectives.
It's fascinating because I can imagine if he comes back, he's the one that's going to be the most immediately fractious with the Imperium as it's come to be, because it's antithetical to what the Emperor purported to want, right? I can't imagine. I mean, Robite is very much the politician, so he doesn't like it either, but he's made accommodation for forces like the Ecclesiarchy, for example. He's factored them into his plans. It's a case of like, well, they're useful for the time being, they're useful, but we are going to have to get rid of all of them as well eventually. But for now, I can bite my tongue. Leman isn't going to do that.
No, and I mean, we know that because the Space Wolves haven't. Like, they just don't tolerate the Ecclesiarchy, and they don't tolerate any of it. They're like, oh, there's this interesting codex that we have to obey. Well, that's not happening.
Yeah, well, that isn't going to happen, is it?
Oh, we need to limit our recruitment. Well, maybe never.
They've also got other fractious problems as well. Of course, I mean, you've got like the 13th Company. They came back from the warp effectively, and they're all mutated, and you know, I mean, one of the
werewolves, like
effectively Viking, you know, big Viking Ubermensch werewolves, because why not, right?
So a pure fantasy I have is that, I mean, this is way too specific to come true, is that if they do, because of course, Leman Russ has been in the warp all of the time, like that's what he has, and he's been around all of that corrupting warp energy for a vast period of time. He's also got these genes that are obviously predisposed towards certain characteristics. I mean, what would be really cool is if they brought out Leman Russ with two models, one of which is just this giant wolf, and another which is the Leman Russ that we know, and that he actually flips between them. And that would be fantastic.
That would be awesome. That would be brilliant. And there is precedent for it in AOS, because there are characters that kind of do a similar thing. There's Morothai for the Daughters of Cain. She does exactly that. There's like the humanoid Morothai character and the big serpentine winged goddess version of her. In the previous version of her, she switched between the two. Now the two exist simultaneously, which is kind of weird, but there's precedent for that.
I mean, that would just be awesome, because I mean, that immediately, like, that's not just fractious, like that's immediately like you have like a mutant shape-shifting Primarch on the loyalist side,
chaos, effectively a chaos thing, right? You know, but for all intents and purposes, which Leman, I mean, for all of his holier than thou-ness, was shifting towards anyway.
I mean, like, it's just there in the Rune Priests who are sorcerers, despite
despite what they claim. You know, they're flat out sorcerers and wizards, and everything they proclaimed and accused the Thousand Sons of being.
Just uncomplicated. I mean, just because they call it runes doesn't mean it's
not. It's pure because it comes from Fenris, and it's the magic of the I'm totally with Ahriman on that one. I'm with Ahriman and Magnus on that one. No, you're sorcerers, you're wizards. Get over it. Get over it.
I mean, like, that's like the big difference between like say Leman Russ and, like, you know, Mortarian's previous hatred of Psychers. Like, Mortarian actually kind of walked the walk, you know. Or more in a more extreme way, I guess. You've now got the Crusading Legion. What are they called?
The Black Templars.
Who actually don't have any Psychers in there. Yeah.
No, in fact, you have to be very careful if you've got a psyker anywhere near them, because they will try to kill them. You know, even if they're another sort of like loyalist librarian, they will try to kill them.
Yeah, they don't really accept that psykers have any place in the Imperium.
No,
like that's
which is ironic, isn't it? I mean, when you consider like who
the Emperor is.
It's like, all right.
Well, yeah, but then they go around that by the whole notion that he's a god
Right,
is getting around that. Yes.
Yeah. Oh, he's not a psyker. He's nothing so Bates, right? He's a god. Again, I mean, wonderful tensions between them and Robotech, because Robotech hates them. It's been made very, very explicit in the books, in the, like Dark Imperium, hates them, hates their guts. He thinks that they are perversions of what the Space Marines are supposed to be. I think there's a point where he's comparing them to the Death Guard, and he says, I prefer them.
I can get that. I mean, not only do they like, because like obviously the Space Wolves have like largely chucked out the Codex, but but nothing with like the same level of self-righteousness as the and also they come from the Imperial Fists, who are pretty standard loyalist legions. So there's a kind of a deeper betrayal going on there.
Oh, definitely.
I don't actually know, but how do the Imperial Fists generally feel about the?
They don't like them. Oh, they don't like. In fact, it's embedded in their mythology and their history. So, like the Black Templars derive from Sigismund, who was the original Black Templar from the Horus Heresy days, and he is a champion of the Imperial Fists who had like a revelation. He had an experience of something quote unquote miraculous, which opened him up to the belief that the Emperor actually is a god rather than just like a very powerful psyker. And there are confrontations between him and Rogel Dawn where Rogel absolutely disowns him. He's like, you are not my son. You are as bad as them outside the walls. He basically tells him flat, you are as bad as they are. Go away. And were it not for the fact that we're on this, the last war footing, were it not for the fact that reality is crumbling down around us, I would kill you myself.
That's pretty explicit hate there.
Yeah. Pretty much. It's total rejection. Rogel can't even there are periods later where he's thinking about it. He's trying to wrap his head around the fact that one of his sons has gone this far, and he can't. It's almost anathema to him. He can't figure it out.
I like that tension actually, because I've never been that interested in the Imperial Fist, but that kind of tension is more my kind of narrative thing. Definitely.
It's kind of sad because they very much took a back seat to all of the other loyalist chapters, legions rather, in the Horus Heresy series. There are a couple of books that deal with them, but Rogel has largely been on Earth fortifying it. That's kind of what he's done. But he's come into his own in the Siege of Terror books, because of course he is the one who's coordinating it all. He is coordinating this impossible war which is across the face of the entire planet and beyond. And you really do, certainly when you get the really good writers like John French and Aaron Dembski Bowden and Dan Abnett, they really go deep on how awful that is for him, like how taxing that is, even for somebody who was made to be that. I mean, this is his purpose, right? This is what he was bred to be. It's the ultimate siege. So he is the perfect Primarch. He is tailor-made for it. But even that, it's destroying him physically and psychologically.
I mean, with all of them, it's about some aspect of themselves as kind of tragic. Like all of the Primarchs are different versions of a kind of tragic. Almost a Greek tragic story. And like with him, it's the most kind of ironic, because it's kind of like he gets what he should get, but just too much. Like he's given his purpose, unlike some of the others who are fundamentally denied their purpose, and that's their tragedy. He's given his purpose, but just in such ridiculous abandon that he can't take it.
It's real. I mean, one of the things that like the Siege of Terror books do really well is emphasizing not just the scale of the conflict, but the consequences of it. So a lot of them are broken up into these wonderful little vignettes where they are almost self-contained stories in their own rights, where they're looking at the war from the perspective of a particular battalion or a particular unit of knights or titans or whatever. And half the time, most of them don't even know why they're fighting. You know, they have no idea. You've got like titans on the traitor quote unquote side, whose pilots don't know what's happening. They've been fighting this grinding, protracted siege for so long, and they're basically fermenting in their own recycled waste, and there's demons chattering in their ears, and they don't know what's going on. It's really wonderful. I mean, it's absolutely stunning. The only characters that have any idea are the ones that have a degree of overview, so the Primarchs by and large.
Yeah,
and even some of them, don't really know what's going on.
Well, with them, like, it's always anything that they do understand is always just a further part of their tragedies.
Yeah.
Like even their awareness is essentially weaponized against them. Like,
definitely. I mean, like Mortarion is probably the best example of that.
Everything he learns is just another wound, essentially.
Exactly, right. Everything inverts everything that he believes and insists on, breaks him down until there's nothing left, just despair. And that's where Nurgle wants him, obviously, because that's where Nurgle gets in.
It's interesting with Rogel Dawn and that whole story of the sort of Imperial Fists and Black Templars.
The Black Templars, yeah.
Like, because there, what you've really got is like a faction of the Imperial Fists basically becoming pretty much like Lorgar, like they're kind of doing the Lorgar thing. Right? They're taking on basically they're kind of continuity word bearers in the Loyalist faction.
Absolutely,
it's just that is very funny. I mean, it is like I love that kind of grim humor, and I'm really glad that that's being maintained in the latest editions of Warhammer.
Likewise,
I think there was a period where that got like slightly put into its backseat. Like, I don't think that humor ever disappeared from the sort of 40k grimdark aspects, but I think that they definitely leaned more into the sort of like a quite childish understanding of coolness, and it's all sort of the kind of military porn. This is all about the cool weapons and the flashy armor and just like less humor, less taking the piss out of itself.
Yeah, absolutely. It became much more about sort of moral absolute. So you've got the chaos is bad, the Imperium is good, and so on and so forth. But they've definitely sort of swung it the other way quite hard in recent editions. So that wonderful level of irony has really settled in again. And it's great to see. It's really, really wonderful to see, like, just that sense of humor that comes from the extremity of the universe, just how incredibly extreme everything is.
It allows you to tell these very bold mythic tales of archetypal forces, and I think those are just more interesting than trying to nuance something that just resists nuancing, or just these, I mean, blunt, hard sci-fi military porn, which I shouldn't be too dismissive of it. If people enjoy that, then that's their business and they have every right to.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like, I mean, I just personally find like long descriptions of battles and tanks to be a little tedious myself, but like that's
some of the writers are very good at it. Some of them are very good at it, and the ones that are good at it, I find quite addictive. So, like Aaron Dembski-Bowden again can do it. I mean, beautifully. His whole thing is void warfare, so it's effectively descriptions of naval battles, really, but in a three-dimensional space, and it works really. He's so good at it. He's so good at capturing like the detail and the nuance of how that would work, that it's actually very, very good. And he marries that to some really, really, really good character stuff as well.
I know that marrying up is really important, but I also think like when that's done right, I mean, I'm sort of thinking a lot about Cormac McCarthy recently because of the obvious reason, and when that's done really right, like one of the things I really like about Cormac McCarthy is he's one of the most sort of action orientated literary writers that I enjoy, because he does add this element of poetry to action, and I think the same can apply for those kind of Warhammer 40,000 battle type things. Like if you have a sense, and I think like naval battles and space battles like really lend themselves to this. If you get this sort of sense of fluidity and poetry in the descriptions, where it's more than just technical detailing, The
Yep.
worst is where it becomes just a kind of catalog of lists.
Oh,
of,
goodness me. Yes.
Yeah, and that just like deadens me.
I always think,
instantly,
I mean, it's slightly off piece, but I always think back to the story, the short story that The Thing is based on, and Who Goes There.
Mm.
And one of the issues with that short story, and I think it's something that a lot of people have when they go back to read it, having watched the film and maybe The Thing from Outer Space as well, is that one of the issues with that story is so much of it is just exactly what you just said. It's lists of technical details.
Yeah,
the characters in that short story talk not like people or even like academics in their field. They talk like catalogs. You've got your mineralogist who just lists mineral details of the snow and of the rocks, and and it's like, please stop.
Seems to be a case of like an author wearing their research too much on their sleeve. Like,
yes!
I think it's always a danger with an author who's like just research, and then just really wants the reader to know.
I mean,
how
don't get me
much
wrong,
they've researched.
It can work. I always think of Herman Melville. I always think of Moby Dick, right? I mean, and it's so clear that Melville is in love with that whaling culture.
But I think that's also part of it. Like, he is in love with it, so he's not just showing you what he knows. Mm-hmm. He's showing you like a geek. He's showing you their passion. Like, there's a passion behind it, and he wants you to understand not just like all of these details, like brute facts. Mm-hmm. But why these things are interesting. He wants you to be interested. Like,
there's an invitational quality to it, isn't it? There's almost like there's a warmness to Moby Dick that I really, really love, because it's exactly what you were saying. He is like the geek showing you into his man cave, right? Yeah. It's like, look, this is so cool. Look at this. This is so cool. Look, this is what happened. This is what they used to do. This is what they thought about this and that. And it is. You can't help but catch the enthusiasm.
And on the polar end, you get a certain kind of writer who, this is especially true of period writing, where they're sort of clearly anxious that you're not going to get that this is in the right period, or that you're going to constantly be like second guessing the period or something, where they just do too much. It's like every other scene is like, and then I open up this newspaper from the 70s and it's got all of these very prominent 1970s stories in it that probably didn't actually all happen in the same day, but you recognize them as being of the 70s. Meanwhile, in the background, this very prominent 1970s song is playing. It's like, I'm pretty sure the 1970s weren't this 70s.
Right, exactly, right. We get it, we get it. Of course, we're having it a lot at the moment with that sort of 30-year cycle where we're looking back at the 1980s. There are a lot of like TV shows and things set in the 1980s at the moment.
Yeah.
And that phenomena that you just described is a real problem. There are like it's down to things like, there's a coffee table and there's obviously going to be a Rubik's cube on it or something. It's like, god, that just didn't happen.
Every single coffee table had at least a minimum of 3 Rubik's cubes. It was like the ball.
At least, right?
No, I mean, it's tedious. I mean, I'm already starting to see the dreaded coming of like the 1990s nostalgia. It's already starting to creep in Gen Z. And I mean, the worst of it was recently when I saw some Gen Z people being nostalgic for Busted. And that was just like horrifying. Like, I mean, just how can you be like what is here to be nostalgic for?
I mean, it's interesting, isn't it? In the 90s, I mean, you were a 90s kid. I was a 90s kid, really. I mean, sort of incoming from the 80s. I was born in 1984, so I'm sort of half and half. It's really strange. I became sentient in the 90s. I remember the 90s more. That's for damn sure.
But 1986, so very similar. Like, it's more than. I mean, I was like 4 at the end of the 80s, so that's not really a period I lived in.
No, it's odd, isn't it? But I look at the 90s and I think, I mean, beyond things like video game culture, maybe comic book culture, what is there that's as defined and as specific as you got in the 1980s culturally? There's almost like a dissolution of those cultural signifiers in the 90s. So
there is a real emptiness to it. yeah.
It's hard to
No.
latch onto, isn't it? I mean, the stuff in the USA and USA culture, stuff like Nirvana later on, the sort of like youth culture, the nihilistic youth culture.
Yeah, yeah, that kind of flourishing of Gen X.
Yeah, yeah,
yeah. I mean, which is always quite. I mean, it's not my ideal thing anyway. It's very hard nosed. It's very sort of. I always find it quite brittle. I mean, I
yeah,
get it where it comes from in the sort of Gen X
yeah.
feeling of hopelessness, and I think like the '90s, yeah. I mean, there's Britpop, I guess, which I'm
Britpop,
not a huge
yeah.
fan of, and
Earlier on in the very early 90s, there was the rave culture, which I think you could do interesting things with, like narratively. That could be really fun.
Yeah. There's
Because
some
of
interesting
its
electronic music stuff, definitely.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
I suppose there's that. There's the club culture. There's the club scenes and whatnot. That
Mhm.
could be really interesting. There's the I mean, for us certainly, there's the efflorescence of queer culture.
Yes, yeah,
in
I
the
think
UK.
that's definitely the case. Like, I think, and I mean, I think it's also interesting how it sort of intersects with sort of previous iterations of queer culture, and then also like it's the beginnings in the late '90s, kind of going into the noughties of like queer culture going online,
Yeah.
and the really contradictory effects of that, like the loss of queer spaces often
Mhm.
because of queer culture going online,
Going
but also
online.
like
Yeah.
new connections. And I mean, I think with queer people generally, like the big impediment has always been, and it's the reason why queer culture is just always urban,
Mhm.
is geographical dispersion.
Yeah.
There's so few queer people in general, and within subgroups of queer people even less, that like unless you have a technology like the internet that just simply overcomes geographical
Yep.
dispersion, like you don't have enough people to produce a critical mass to create a culture or subcultural grouping.
That's it. There's no
Except in, like,
organizational
major cities.
right. There's no
Yeah.
organizational medium or principle, is there? It's very, very difficult. It's I mean, it's that old joke, It's like the old Jewish joke, isn't it? Like you have 10 Jewish people in a room. What have you got? An argument? It's the same with queer people, right?
Yeah,
We're all there's no real organizing principle apart from our queerness, and that is it's kind of a diffuse notion. It's different for all of us, right? It's not it's very difficult to organize around in and of itself. And as you say, with our movement into abstract spaces, i.e. virtual spaces, what we had in previous decades, despite the pressures and problems that were facing us culturally and politically then, which were I suppose the temples, which were the bars, right? The bars and the clubs. We don't have that anymore. They are increasingly dying. And that is problematic. That is problematic because we are not meeting one another face to face. We are not coming together physically. And that's problematic.
Not in the same numbers and in the same way. And I think there's not the same cross-culture thing, because I think one of the problems with the internet, and I'm very aware that the internet is a two-sided phenomenon, and there are good and bad aspects.
Absolutely.
But I think one of the real problems with it is it does allow a nichification because of those overcoming those cultural and geographical distances that allows people to increasingly be only with their own, and their own become defined in a small way. And I'm not making the sort of right-wing point of like echo chambers or anything.
No, but I know what you mean. It is a problem. What tends to happen is we operate within microcosms, right?
Yeah.
And because of that, it can often feel like we're doing something organizational and meaningful and significant, when in fact, like outside of that microcosm and outside of that medium, we're really not.
Yeah, we can just sort of be a speck. And I think that in itself is not necessarily such a problem if we weren't increasingly under attack and actually needing to organize coherently together. And I think that's one of the problems, is that we're not in a very good situation to do that.
No.
And I do think that allows, it certainly allows a lot of bad faith. I mean, there's broader problems with the internet too. I mean, it's part of the mediums that we use now, the social media mediums, that I think are just inherently hostile spaces to anything liberatory and emancipatory, because they're fueled by advertisement and therefore clicks and sensationalism and very like low level, low intellectual, low effort content that it's just like so much better for the right, because they don't really require very much in the way of depth and thought.
truth and consideration are not factors, right? You don't have to even consider them. I mean, you'd only have to look at like the very charmless figures that represent the right. Certainly in this country. I mean, recently we had, Lawrence Fox on one of his rampages, and it's so blatant. I mean, to anyone who's ever bothered to consider or study these things, it's so blatant. The insincerity of it is so blatant. It is just. It's exactly that phenomena you were talking about. I'm going to say the most incendiary thing and do the most incendiary thing to draw attention to myself. That's it.
And that works on an internet space. It's in fact the only thing that works reliably on internet spaces today. And I think it's sort of written into the architecture of Web 2.0. I mean, I think Web 2. I mean, to be fair, I think Web 2.0 was always kind of implied by Web 1.0 in the way that, within a capitalist context, it was the obvious direction of travel.
Sadly so. So from that sort of frontier land that the original internet represented, where everything was potential, where everything was there was a sense of burgeoning community and of togetherness and of a moving forward, a potential here that's kind of died away as it's become more established, as it's become polluted by corporate influence and so on and so forth, and
has often just become like the playground of extraordinarily rich, obscenely rich, like reactionary men. Like I mean, we're now getting the absurd spectacle of Zuckerberg and Musk engaging in a allegedly, I don't know if it's actually going to happen, but allegedly they're going to engage in a boxing or some kind of fight. I mean, which if anything else just seems patently ridiculous, because as I understand it, Zuckerberg is trained in martial arts and is a regular attendee of gyms, and Musk is a barely, like functioning 50-something-year-old who is not fit.
I think
or trained.
Our mutual friend Gerard Galvin Barry recently described him as a half-chewed chicken nugget of a man.
Yeah, that seems fair. Yeah, I mean, it doesn't seem like a very good arrangement to have, even aside from the stupidity of it.
I mean, it would be a very interesting thing if his hubris ends up with him being hospitalized or something, wouldn't it? That would be a spectacle and a half.
Yes, I have to say I can't imagine having any sympathy.
Or interest either.
I
just
can't.
Whole thing. It's just I just cannot.
I mean, we were talking about Grimdark before in space and sort of 2000 AD comics and stuff. And like it feels like the kind of thing that you would see in Judge Dredd comics, like two
or
rich
Future
people
Shots,
arranging
maybe.
Absolutely Future Shots. I mean, it's actually got that very standalone, stupid sort of, but like wryly commenting sort of premise that Future Shots often did. Like I would say stupid, but like intentionally stupid. Like they're kind of like they're parodic and they kind of did that really well. It feels like that. It feels like or like a standalone thing from RoboCop or any of the other grim dark stuff. Like
maybe a Black Mirror episode or something like that. It does feel like that, doesn't it? It's that whole thing of feeling incredulous about the reality you live in. That notion that this is indeed. I mean, people say it's the worst of all possible timelines. It's like no, it's the stupidest of all possible timelines, which is often very difficult to discern from the worst of all possible timelines. Whatever if there's an organizing principle somewhere, if there is a god or an AI or a computer or some extra dimensional entity that's authoring all of this somehow or controlling it, it's a really bad writer.
It's the word that always comes to me, and I'm always careful with this word because it's deployed a lot by reactionaries in very negative ways, is obscene. And there's just an obscenity to it all. Like if you look at, and I think this is why Grimdark actually, and I've said this sort of before, I've written a little bit on it, like for me, Grimdark is a better dystopian vision of our times than things like 1984 or Brave New World. Because the villains in 1984 and Brave New World were these sort of paradigmatic, distant, slightly austere leaders who accumulated power and didn't want to be known. It was actually the villains who have really taken over the world, the sort of dictatorial figures. They are much more like the dictatorial figures of Grimdark. These obscene, overdone characters who are just too much. They're not even really plausible as actual human beings. You know, people like Trump, but also like Modi and I'm trying to think of the Hungarian one, but yeah, I mean, you know, they just go on and on and on. Like, there's so many of them now.
It's the banality of them, isn't it?
China. I mean, they're all the same. They're all kind of. I mean, there's differences, but they're all kind of cut out of the same sort of general mold, and they're all these larger than life, obscene figures who are, in any other context, just ridiculous. I mean, Z, for example, like banning Winnie the Pooh because people were comparing him to that, and Trump like burying his wife in a way that helps him get out of tax or something, or his ex-wife in a way that helps him get out of tax. And these aren't the actions of real human beings. They feel like badly drawn up caricatures of dictators.
Yeah, it's cartoonish, isn't it? It's obscene in a banal way. That's what I find most interesting about it. It's the banality of them. They're not even obscene in a manner that's epic or poetic or villainous or anything like that. They are ridiculous. They're absurd.
And there's always something slightly gross about them, like even in their kind of, because they're always figures who are trying to channel a degree of very aggressive masculinity, but they're also people who aren't, like, let's be honest, not like muscular, like Ubermenschen types. Like,
it's the Emperor's New Clothes, right? It is the Emperor's New Clothes. The more they insist upon their apparent masculinity, the more effete and pathetic they seem, right? They're trying to affect something that is so out of sync with their own reality, and it's just and again, like, they just feel like villains who could occupy the universe of Judge Dredd or RoboCop or Warhammer 40,000. Totally. If you wrote it, you'd be told, go away and rewrite that character, right? Because it just doesn't fly. In fiction, it doesn't fly by and large. You're sort of like, no, this is too silly, right? I mean, that's when you look at sort of political and satirical comedy writers, they often say one of the reasons they stopped doing what they were doing, it's certainly the case for things like The Thick of It, for example, is it's too absurd. You can't satire it. You can't parody it. It's ridiculous, you know. And if you wrote half the stuff that has actually happened into your script, you would be told to go away and rewrite it.
It's very true. Like, I think there's a level in which, and I think this is integrated into neoliberalism itself and its own contradictions, in that it is simultaneously this force of this kind of very market-led ideal of autonomy and freedom, although it's always kind of with this caveat that whereas in traditional liberalism, as problematic as that could be, the individual was always at least idealistically conceived of as the actual individual, even though that individual was always, you know, in the standard sort of like way of things in you know, European countries, white male, etc. But still were an individual, whereas I think neoliberalism turns the individual unit into the sort of nuclear family, and then it uses that to import a sort of a deep vein of like fascism into its liberalism, into its way of constructing society. And I think that tension has always kind of led to these kind of ridiculous sort of cultural manifestations that we see with Trump and Modi and Boris Johnson and all of the others. Like, they are these kind of figures of absurdity because they kind of are representations of that tension. Like
they're products of it, right? They are absolute products of it.
They'll like cry from the rooftops about market freedom and freedom of expression and individual liberty, whilst at the same time being these like ultra reactionary conservative figures of oppression, of like going after marginalized and minority groups of and like, there's just no way that can't be silly. I mean, actually, the character that really summarizes them in fiction, I always think, is I think it's Biff is the name from
Back to the Future. Very much. He's very much almost like the personification thereof, right?
Like him becoming the sort of world leader in the nightmarish dystopian future. Just feel. I mean, even in the way that it's the affects work of this kind of school bully as dictator, with all of the sort of very Las Vegas style, like nouveau riche sort of trappings in that very Americana way. It just feels, I mean, that feels so Trump.
It does, doesn't it? I mean, of course, in Back to the Future, it's a joke, right? It's a satire. It's meant to be ridiculously extreme. It's the thing that can't possibly come about.
Actually happened, yeah.
But it happened, right?
Yeah. And I mean, I do think, like, I think there's a degree to which, like, Grimdark hasn't got the credit for doing this, of actually sort of seeing into, because Grimdark starts in the late 1970s and the early 1980s with neoliberalism. It begins as a satire, as a political social satire, with the thing it's satirizing.
Yeah, absolutely, as a reaction to neoliberalism.
Yeah, and I think it sees right there and then the whole trajectory of the thing that it's satirizing, and actually, you know, it's weird to call things like 40,000 and RoboCop and Judge Dredd prophetic, because obviously they're intentionally silly and over the top. But in a way, in a deep way, I think they are quite prophetic. Prophetic. They have grasped what they did grasp what was coming, and I think they grasped it quite cleverly. It's both interesting and also slightly disturbing.
Slightly disturbing and despairing. I mean, it's very easy, isn't it, to sort of slip into complete nihilism when you look at it in those terms. I try to avoid it myself as much as I possibly can, but it is easy. It is easy to do.
I mean, I think the hope comes in also the ridiculousness of it. I mean, the fascism of the 20th century was a fascism that projected itself into these grand mythic visions that were ridiculous still, and as well as being sort of ungrounded and, you know, often requiring like invented traditions are obviously always a thing within modernity, but like not to that extent. Like where, you know, they would literally claim that Nazism was like an inheritor to, say, Atlantis and stuff right. Like actually claim that there's like some kind of genetic continuity or something.
Yes, and there's even like a metaphysics like attached to it, you know, like an occultism and what. It's so bizarre.
Yeah, but it had this kind of like forwardness in that sense, and it was always this torn forwardness, because they would like simultaneously project themselves into like 1,000-year right, whilst also being beset on all sides by a hostile world that's fundamentally about conflict. But I think like fascism today doesn't really even have like those visions. It's almost like they're kind of just waiting to be bit characters in Mad Max.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. It's fascinating. Fascism today. I think you're right. There is a distinction. There is a distinction between the fascism of that era and the fascism of today, in the sense that the fascism of today often doesn't even bother with the narratives. It doesn't have the grand narratives at all. It doesn't have any notion of a tomorrow or a project that it's building, because it's predominated by narcissists, right?
Yeah.
People who are only interested in their own short-term gain and their own promotion, regardless of what happens tomorrow. You know, when people call it a death cult, they're absolutely right. It's not an exaggeration. It's not hyperbolic.
And you know, while fascism is always you know, rests atop of, you know, distortions, lies, and prejudice, and therefore always is, you know, predisposed towards death and towards nihilism. I think today there isn't that pretense, and what you get is this. Narcissism is a good word, because it's a kind of narcissistic apocalypticism. Like, you know, that's why they're all preppers. Like, they're not planning to build some like Aryan superpower. They're planning to be the toughest, nastiest piece of shit in the desert of a nuclear wasteland. Like,
right.
Like they want to be the main player of a Fallout game.
And of course, the irony being that they are the least qualified, by and large, to ever be that. You know. Well,
I mean, the idea, like, I mean, also just this like notion that you can purely tough your way through. You know, something like a nuclear apocalypse, or even just the breakdown of. I mean, the people that will survive will be the people that survive on the basis of deep skills, and I mean, if anyone survives in these conditions, will be people who survive on the basis of deep skills and community bonds and I mean, if you look at like how so-called primitive societies, I hate the term primitive because it confers all these racialized crap and so on and so forth. But like the way that pre-agricultural societies or societies that didn't adopt agricultural methods endure, they're not like these they're not these might is right kind of.
No.
Yeah, they couldn't.
They're
They
the exact
actually
opposite.
Yeah,
they're the exact opposite of that.
And like the idea that they could endure under those conditions through a kind of might is right principle is delusional, to say the very least.
Absolutely.
I mean, my own perspective is I'm not really sure. Like I also think, and it's kind of maybe linked to their narcissism, this idea that like this fixation on survival, no matter how much else goes wrong, seems weird to me, because I'm not like really sure. Like, I want to stop the terrible thing happening. I don't really care that much about my survival in the face of unimaginable human suffering and just horror upon horror. Like, what's the point? Like,
exactly. What is the point? You may as well bring the entire experiment to a halt at that point, right? I'm almost edging that way now. I'm sort of like, well, you know what? Scientific discovery, forget it while we're operating under these systems, because under these systems it's always going to be perverse. It's always going to be militarized. It's always going to be used by the worst people alive, principally to oppress the rest of us, So let's just stop and rearrange what our experiment is as the race, as the human race. What do we want here on planet Earth? What is tomorrow? That's what we need to be asking. What do we want? What is the future of this planet and of our species?
One of the things I really liked about the show Battlestar Galactica, because it's very much confronting these kinds of apocalyptic questions. And I mean, it is a show that is weird politically. Like, it's got, obviously it's got deeply religious and slightly right-wing undertones, and it does quite cleverly like push right-wing ideas and talking points sometimes. But then it also has like a whole season which is just a unapologetic critique of the invasion of Iraq, that includes like the idea that suicide bombing might be justified on American television, of all things. So that's kind of amazing. But one of the things it did well is it did kind of ask those kinds of questions. It asked like questions not just can humanity survive, which would tend to be the focus of those kinds of shows, but like, why should humanity survive? What is the reason for humanity? Like, what is the goal of humanity as a collective project?
What's the project? That's a problem I think people of imagination, of any kind of imagination, run into all the time, right? It's one of the ultimate questions that is society itself actually tries to prohibit you from asking, and certainly from providing any answers for.
And there's like, ostensibly the reason for not asking that question is because the question is inherently nihilistic, but I actually think not asking the question is perhaps more deeply nihilistic.
I would say not answering the question is extinctionist. Not answering the question is extinctionist, because all that's going to happen is what we're seeing now. You're going to have these systems that are poisoned by tradition and by agenda and by so many factors that are just grinding on pointlessly with no end project in sight, often in contradiction of one another, with no idea of where they're going. Slicked, of course, by the pulped bodies of the human beings who die as a result of them every single day.
Yeah, just uncomplicatedly agree. Like, it's a horror show to not ask those kind of deeper questions of our purpose, even if it's a created purpose by ourselves in existence. And I think we do have this thing where they're all still human systems created by humans and human choices. And, one of the tricks, I think, of capital is to endlessly, I shouldn't say I think, like, it is one of the tricks of capital is to endlessly obscure. I'm slightly personifying capital there, which is a bit wrong. But broadly, it's to obscure that fact of that we are in control of our own destiny. And I think a lot of what, abolishing capital entails, beyond just breaking the value form and all the rest of it, is actually I think it's implied by that is a self mastery, is like taking charge of our own destiny. And I mean, I do sometimes think sometimes people sort of, especially on my middle left, the Marxist left, will kind of talk as if Marxism is a kind of panacea to all the problems, which I do slightly dislike, because the way I conceive of it is Marxism doesn't really solve anything. It's not even really a system in the way that capitalism is a system. Like communism, that is, I should say, is not a system. It is the freeing of humanity to make its own collective choices, to make its own destiny in a way that we currently abnegate behind these kind of lawless laws of these systems that we don't take ownership over because of the way that they're constructed and because of the way that they divide humanity into exploited and exploiter. And I think so often we have this sort of pseudo sense of anti-nihilism in a refusal to actually face the collapse of these systems and the inability of these systems to actually permit ongoing human life in anything like a flourishing way.
And it's amazing, isn't it, how so much of our media and of our input and of our culture at large is designed to distract and divert us from that. Even not just asking the questions, but from perceiving that there are questions to be asked.
And not even intentionally,
no. It's not like there's some vast Machiavellian conspiracy cult or anything. There are not people behind the scenes saying, make sure that this particular image is never used, or make sure that is never done. It doesn't work like that. It happens naturally. It's almost like an immune system. It's like culture's immune system.
It's also because we live in the societies we live in, and those are the societies that reproduce our lives, they're also the societies that reproduce our values, and questioning those is painful. So when we go to entertainment, there's a predisposition to not ever question those things. I think the countervailing thing there is that when those systems start failing catastrophically, the need for an explanation comes in, and that's where you have the rivalry between good and bad explanation.
And ironically, good and bad fiction and media as well. Right? Because good fiction is the stuff that provides you the means and the contexts for asking the questions and the imperative to do so, right? Whereas the bad fiction is conciliatory and pandering and is often on the side of established norms and expectations.
It's trying to make you feel better about your own misery, about your social misery, or the social misery around you, which I think is much the same thing, because I actually don't think even people who claim to actually enjoy living in a situation of social misery. I mean, I'm generally of the slightly classical opinion that, vice is actually not very rewarding in life. And I think with reactionaries, they just seem me to be universally unhappy people.
Oh, absolutely, despite whatever money or status or potential or possibilities that they have, that they're just naturally born into. And the reason being that they've got no identity, right? They've got no sense of who they are. They've never been fed through the experiences and the often the traumas, the things that people have to in order to develop a sense of personality or a sense of identity. They're flailing out for something, and it's all come from this synthetic culture that they're born into. Oh, you're wonderful. Oh, you're superb because you are better than the common herd, right? When in fact the inverse is true. The inverse is true because they never had to learn anything.
There's no individuation there. They're accepting sort of a ready-made template of who they are, and also I just think the denial of other people's humanity is partly because we're all wrapped up in each other, a denial of our own humanity. And when those notions of self that are given to certain people are in conflict with other people and fundamentally depend upon the denial of other people, that's just already a sort of self-root for reactionaries. And I mean, you can see it. There's no. I mean, I just kind of take it almost. I mean, arguably, it's not a very robust way of arguing the point, but I just kind of take it as a given that the kinds of behaviors you see from these people are just not the behaviors of happy people no matter
No,
what they say. Like
absolutely.
you know, you look at like, I mean, for example, you look at like Musk and his like railing against trans people, which he's been up to again lately. And it's so clearly rooted in his own inability to reconcile with his daughter. Like, it's
so
like,
clear, right?
Nothing else going on.
Another great example is Rowling, right? I mean, Rowling, obviously,
yeah.
what I see in Rowling is this transference of trauma.
Yeah.
I think actually, she comes from a traumatic background. She had what it seems to be a fairly abusive marriage at one time. And I think amateur psychologist, but what I see there is her transferring all of that pain and that trauma onto a scapegoat, which is, of course, trans people, largely trans women.
No, I think that's entirely true. And I think, like, for some cis women who engage in transphobia, transphobia is, I think I said this recently on some platform, I can't remember which, but transphobia is a kind of consolation prize for misogyny that you get to, like, degrade, you get social permission to degrade other women. In this case, trans women, but, historically, obviously, there's been plenty of white women who've degraded black women and so on and so forth.
Exactly that. It's the kicking down, right?
Yeah, exactly.
It's the kicking down, the pulling the ladder up behind you. You're getting the same thing with gay people who are siding with the anti-trans movement, right? Not realizing, of course, that because of the affiliations of the anti-trans movement and where it comes from, they're going to be on the train as well.
No, I actually just recently shared a meme. I don't know if you saw it online.
I did.
It's just brilliant.
And it's absolutely true. It is fundamentally true and inarguable. It's inarguable. I have a real problem at the moment with accommodationist queers. I really don't like them. And it's not, ironically, they don't just attack trans people either. They tend to attack other gay people who are not of a particular standard, who are not acting in a way that's prescribed by straight culture. So it's like gay people, particularly gay men, who are what they consider to be negative representations of what gay means. So you're over-sexualized, or you use the hookup, apps or whatever. It's like, well, fuck off. I'm really sorry.
Kind of respectability part. Yes. I mean, I've always felt like, as non-binary femme person, like, the spaces that I found most welcoming that aren't just trans have tended to be bisexual spaces, and that's because they've been through the exact same internalized shit that trans people are now going through.
Haven't they? I mean, it was more common. Interestingly, the biphobia in gay spaces was more common, in queer spaces, was more common in like the early to mid 2000s. There was a lot of it around then. And again, it comes from this sort of like historical collective trauma, doesn't it? Gay people have obviously been the targets of this kind of scapegoating, the targets de jure for decades. And it's almost like we transfer it onto whatever comes after. It acts almost like a release valve. If there is a demographic that's even more diffuse and even less understood and even less organized, then that's where you transfer it. That's where you dump it. And it's appalling. It's something I have no time for.
It's also the more liminal identities, isn't it? Like, it's the identities. I mean, because they exist. I think one of the things that identities do, people within identities do when they're not doing well, when they're feeling like that things aren't working out well for their demographic, is that they calcify a notion of that identity into sort of a static, reified thing that's fundamentally unchanging, and then defend the boundaries of that. And so it's the people who are not actually just obviously and unapologetically outside those boundaries, like straight people who don't even want to be inside those boundaries. It's the people who are on the edges of those new boundaries that end up targeted. So for gay people, it's obviously bi people, because they exist in this sort of slightly more nebulous space. And then trans people, obviously, as well, because they upset some of the parameters of and even within the trans community, like, it's very rare, and unfortunately it's very rare, but you do have the trans medicalists who are like, who they aim at either trans people who haven't been able to or don't want to medically transition,
Mhm.
or at non-binary people, irrespective of whether they medically transition. I mean, I always say I'm a medically transitioning non-binary person, but that doesn't
Mhm.
matter to trans meds, because even though they claim that it's all about medical transition, they just don't accept that
No.
non-binary is a thing. Because
Right.
precisely because if you want to bound up and border the what it is to be trans, then you've got to get rid of those people. And I mean, for all of these groups, asexual people have also obviously been targeted, because they kind of exist in
Absolutely.
this sort of end of the sort of that weird sort of in between space within these borders. I'm
Well, I
not
think
actually saying these people are inherently nebulous, but they're
no.
nebulous to the artificial borders that are created.
Absolutely. I mean, if you want a demographic that is probably one of the most poorly understood of
Yeah.
any of us who come under the rainbow of queer, the asexuals. Wow. People
Yeah.
just don't get them at all.
No,
They really don't. They don't
Yeah.
understand a thing unless you kind of know asexual people and talk to them, you know. There are so many flawed and false preconceptions, and I think it's because part of that, of course, is because for many human beings, the sex drive is imperative, right? It's just part of who we are. The notion of people for whom, not necessarily that it doesn't exist, but it's not expressed, or they don't like expressing it, or for some it doesn't exist, you know, is almost alien. It's strange, you know.
And there's that lack of, and then there's that lack of comprehension. Also, there's this kind of, I always find, I mean, I shouldn't speak with too much like self-knowledge, because I'm not ace, but like there's a sense of that it either isn't real because of that, because of its strangeness.
They get that a lot, as do our bi siblings, you know.
Yeah. Or conversely, there's quite often that like sense of like, well, there's no problem. Like
Right.
Obviously you don't, you know, they just deny that there's any. I mean, which is weird, because you're simultaneously denying what somebody is and saying that they're not oppressed, which is kind of contradictory.
And of course, when you stop and apply the least critical pressure to that claim, asexual people don't have problems in these cultures.
Yeah.
Are you kidding?
Based and rooted around relationships and romances. I mean, like, you know, in terms of like representation, there's barely a film that isn't also a romance.
Right. There's
no matter
barely
what
a
else
story,
the genre.
right? I mean,
exactly.
You struggle to find them, yeah?
Yeah, and like and just every expectation as well. Like you know, it's one thing to not meet sort of the expectations of heterosexual society in terms of, oh, you're not going to be in a relationship with somebody of the opposite sex or gender or whatever. And you know, then like the expectations, obviously asexual people aren't meeting other, you know, they just don't necessarily, I mean, some of them do want to be in relationships, but some of them just don't necessarily want to be in any kind of romantic relationship ever. It's not you know, aromantic people, that it's just not even on their radar. And that's, I mean, the idea that isn't a challenge in this kind of social situation.
Well, I mean,
ridiculous.
Just within family units, right?
Yeah.
Alone as a microcosm, just within family units, you get it all the time, right? Whether it's overt or whether it's covert, you get, you know, is so and so, when is so and so going to settle down? When is so and so going to do this or do that? Or
and then of course there's gender dimensions to it. You know, you know, if a man isn't interested in sex, and there's like just implicitly something less manly about that person.
There's something wrong, quote unquote, with them, right?
Yeah. And then I mean, I imagine conversely, like maybe the kinds of like the kind of pseudo acceptance of ace women will be kind of on the wrong basis in that way, like, oh, they're, you know, very chaste or something like that. Like this kind of like this idea of them as being like somehow more pure or something like that.
Yeah. It's based on almost like traditional archetypes, almost like Tolkien-esque archetypes.
And it's still a kind of fetishization and
of course it is.
No, I mean, I always say, like, the thing I love about the term queer is how expansive and open it is, and anyone who wants to try and police that is
good luck. You know, best of luck, because it ain't gonna happen.
Yeah.
they fail. I mean, from beginning to end, they absolutely fail. You are never going. I mean, that's one of the big sources of hope for me, to be perfectly honest. I said this in conversation with Jared Galvin Barry recently. The genie's out of the bottle.
Yeah, yeah.
The genie's out of the bottle. There is no putting it back in. They're done. They're done. The people who are opposing us now, they're not going to win. They're not going to. I mean, don't get me wrong. That doesn't mean that we don't have to oppose them at every corner to make sure that they don't. But they can't anyway.
I mean, to some degree, the vehemence of the reaction is in part an acknowledgement of that. This is, for a lot of them, the last desperate cry of an idea of how the world should be socially organized that they kind of know is done.
It's done. Yeah.
There will be new reactionary ideologies and new reactionary tendencies, but their particular conceptions and pet peeves just doesn't have the social basis anymore.
You only have to look at it generationally, right? You only have to look at it generationally. By and large, it's not universally true, but by and large, generations below ours, they don't know what this is all about. They're like, they've grown up with their queer uncles and mothers and fathers and brothers and sisters and friends, and they're like, what is this all about? This is nonsense. This is garbage. What are our parents and grandparents talking about?
Yeah. No, I agree. I mean, you can even see that in like microcosm within like political dynasties. I mean, you look at like, for example, the Clintons, who I'm not a huge fan of, and as much as I'm not a particular fan of Chelsea Clinton either, like she doesn't share her mother's transphobia, and that's just a generational thing. Like
right.
Yeah, like she's just not of that generation, and I think that is like a broad concern for these people that they're not. I mean, I do think like it is always also important to emphasize that like reactionary ideologies, because they aren't really rooted in anything real.
No, that's it.
Constantly reinvent themselves and reinvent
this is
targets.
This is the point, and we need to start looking at it dynamically, don't we? We need, as a culture, we need to start looking at it dynamically. At this point, we know that that's the case. We know that any sort of scapegoating ideology is designed as a distraction and a cover from greater evils, right? And we need to start looking at it in those terms when they are out there searching for their whatever the next is going to be. And I've no doubt they're already doing it, because the trans thing is going to burn itself out eventually. They're going to have no choice but to just put it down. It will happen. It'll be about a decade, I imagine, before it happens. And terrible things are probably going to happen in between now and then. But it will burn itself out. So they'll have to look for something else. And my guess is, because they focus so hard on the queer community in this instance, it will turn to something else. It will turn to either an ethnic minority or a religious minority or a cultural minority, or because it's going to have to be something, right?
Because they always need like a meta. They always need a meta prejudice. It's a prejudice that frames all their other prejudices. And I think for a lot of them right now, trans people are definitely serving that role. But you're right. It because it is baseless. I mean, my always worry is like where I see reactionary stuff start to take hold in younger generations, and I think I'm very sort of mildly, let's say, actually rather than very, like, proud of millennials as a whole. I think millennial generation, I mean, I have problems with the generational thing, but I think the millennial generation, in areas that I know of well enough to speak with any kind of authority, geographically speaking, have been largely quite progressive. But I do worry that under the onslaught of attacks against them and also just the degree of social atomization, that there are like pockets, and it's much more fractured of reactionary stuff coming into Gen Z. And like I see this in terms of like the Andrew Tate stuff and how popular that's become amongst very young men, and really taking hold. And apparently it's become even a problem in schools now, where teachers are female teachers are being abused by like Andrew Tate style fans with the kind of shit you'd expect them to say. But also like these weird sort of subcultural things, which are clearly to a degree a response to like how difficult the world is in terms of like the pressures and rent and employment and such. But you're seeing these kind of things like trad wives, for example, where like women are modeling themselves on a kind of 1950s ideal of femininity that isn't just inherently also very racialized, inherently transphobic, and inherently very limiting to themselves as well. It's an ideal of like their subservience to an ideal husband. And of course, it's an ideal that references back to the 1950s but didn't really exist.
It didn't really exist, right? It's a cartoon. Right?
Yeah.
It's an exaggeration.
But
at best, it's an exaggeration.
But you can see how it's appealing to their sense of desperation. And then on the inverse, and much worse than that, is like the incels and the pickup artistry and all of that stuff, which is, does have a certain niche in sort of younger, amongst younger people.
Well, it's what you were talking about earlier, isn't it? It's that atomization. It's that escalating cultural atomization where we are separated from one another and therefore don't develop sincere identity. Because sincere identity is not an absolute or prescribed thing. It's something. It's an ongoing experiment up until the point when you die, right? There is no absolute certainty of who you are or what you are or how you operate. That just isn't what identity is. And in fact, in order to determine any kind of sincere sense of identity, you have to put down the notion of certainty or of prescription of what people tell. Part of developing identity, of course, is that really painful, traumatic process of taking everything that you've been told or conditioned to believe of yourself and calling it into question, and often abandoning those parts of yourself that are problematic or that are derived from trauma or neurosis, learning to either cope with them or limit them or get over them. And what people like Andrew Tate and whatnot, like the ideologues, the flapping heads, they provide a delusion of identity, which seems very attractive because it's certain and it's simple, and there are very prescribed ways of operating and of getting what you want, quote unquote. And that's the problem.
And they can wrap all of the simplicities up, because I think like people aren't stupid. They see that it's kind of a simple, slightly cartoonish way of being, but they can veil that behind these layers of irony. Like what is Tate? I mean, Andrew Tate will be like, "Oh, I'm waking you up from the Matrix," and then what you get at the end of that is what, like a sports car and lots of like really cheap sexual gratification that abuses other people. Besides from being unethical, it's a really cheap vision. It's like,
I was going to say, I mean, like, know, especially using that terminology, right? Waking up from the Matrix, that should, if that's what you're promising, then it should be revelatory.
It should be. I mean, like the Matrix is literally channeling Gnostic myths. Waking up from the Matrix in the context of the film, putting aside the trans allegory stuff and how that upsets the slightly weird right-wing approximation of the franchise. Like putting that aside, like it is just kind of very bog standard Gnostic stuff, and it's like that should be like waking up to higher spiritual truths, not capitalist
baubles, not materialism and cheapness, and banality.
But like that stuff isn't really even implicit. Like it's very explicit in Andrew Tate's sort of cell. And the way that that's handled, the way that that contradiction between these like ridiculously over the top spiritualist language and the paucity of what's been actually offered as a goal is to just say, oh, it's kind of all ironic. It's all like layers and layers of like tongue-in-cheekness of like parentheses within parentheses within parentheses.
Which is one of the tricks of the right, isn't it, at the moment? It's one of the tricks they use when they are being absolutely awful and when they're trying to condition people to be absolutely awful. Oh, it's a joke. Oh, it's meant ironically. Oh, fuck off, honestly.
It's not. It's like, it's always as simple and as stupid as it
seems. Right. Like, when they tell you what they are, when they tell you what they are and show you what they are, you believe them, right? The difference, the thing there, and I think this is a problem with a lot of like modern cultural notions of irony, is that there is actually no irony operating here. No.
It's in a way it's a pretense of having a pretense. But there is no pretense really. It is just bluntly as silly and as obscene. Again, I mean the word obscene, this is why it keeps coming to me, because there is something slightly obscene about that, both what is being presented and also how it's being presented.
Oh, absolutely. I always look at like Jeremy Clarkson recently, when he was absolutely lambasted for that awful piece that he wrote about Harry's wife, whatever her name is.
yeah,
I can't
yeah.
remember her name. I'm not, not particularly.
Megan.
Megan, yeah.
Yeah.
That's exactly what he was doing, and I have no doubt in his own mind, it's not Machiavellian. He's not complex enough for that. He doesn't understand either that it's not irony. This is what he actually feels. This is what he actually thinks. He was being honest, bizarrely.
Yeah.
In that article, that's what he thinks of women. That's what he thinks of women who are not white, who are not English, who are not of a very particular standard.
And especially if they break the script.
Exactly, exactly that. And I have no doubt that he is not sophisticated enough to actually understand that that's the case. But we saw it. Everyone else saw it.
No, it's absolutely true, and it's like. It's a weird thing. I mean, it's that this kind of like being honest by being dishonest, which is so much of how the right does things. It comes down to also that thing that's constantly repeated of, wherever the right accuses you of is a kind of telling on themselves.
Yeah, it's a confession. Always.
Yeah.
If they are accusing you of it, then it's a confession. You're seeing it now, obviously, with the groomer language and whatnot, which we shouldn't be accepting, by the way. We should be taking them to fucking court collectively. Every single one of them uses that language. Let them put their money where their mouth is. Let them put the money where their mouth is.
Absolutely ridiculous. Like a culture. I mean, there's no culture as steeped in child abuse as the political right.
As the political right, in every manifestation, in every form, there is no culture as steeped in child abuse as them. And again, it's that whole thing. It's often not even conscious that they're doing it. It's that projection. It's that confessionary aspect. We are guilty of this, therefore we are going to accuse you of which we are guilty.
But it's also because of the way that they naturalize things. So whenever there's something that's uncomfortable within the status quo for the right, because they are nothing but defenders of the status quo, their way of getting around it, and I was actually recently having a discussion with a trans friend sort of along these lines, is to naturalize that problem and to say, well, this isn't a social problem. So like if we're talking about like rape culture, let's say, well, men are just inherently rapists. They just are predisposed towards these animalistic sexual desires, and we can try and control that socially by caging men in all kinds of horrible ways, but ultimately, like, it's just an inevitable fact of human society that men will do that. It's not a social problem, it's a natural problem. And they do that, I think, with things like child abuse. So for them, it's not really relevant that they do it, because of course they do it, because it's just unavoidable. What's relevant is that they think that because queerness is unnatural, its very existence is a danger to those groups that they want to quote unquote protect, which really means hoard as a resource. Like
exactly.
The reason why women and children are like the protected groups is like they're the social reproductive groups. They're the groups that are the future workers and are the breeders, or breeding vessels of workers in their worldview.
It's also euphemistic, isn't it? It's also euphemistic. I mean, when they say, they're not talking about children, they're talking about protecting the status quo. That's what they're talking about.
No, I mean, I think, and the word childhood there does actually, children does actually function very directly for that, because what they're really talking about is often ideas. Like the abuse that they're often talking about is being exposed to queerness as a concept.
Yes, that's it.
It's a danger to their notion of the natural order. I mean, but their notion of the natural order is just very comfortable with all kinds of atrocities.
Absolutely, absolutely. I mean, you see it all the time. You see it all the time with people like Jordan Peterson. He uses the euphemism order. He will always use that euphemism order. He says, I'm a champion of order, and liberals and whatnot are the left are agents of social chaos. But within that order, he's absolutely fine with fascist ideology, with so much that's absolutely atrocious, as long as it happens within the established order. As long as it's prescribed. You see it with Rowling as well. I mean, you see it with liberals as well as people who are on the right. Liberals are like this too. Centrists are like this. They don't believe in systemic evil. They like to ignore the fact of systemic evil. As long as there is an order, it doesn't actually matter if there is systemic evil, because it's happening within systems.
Ultimately, the big thing is like whether or not you have a radical critique. And I have a lot of time for radical liberals. I mean, there's a guy I like reading called Rutger Bregman, who I disagree with on most of his analysis. Like, he is, a radical liberal. His big thing is promoting universal basic income, which I, don't have a huge problem with, but I don't think it would work. That would probably cover most of my responses to Rutger Bregman's ideas. I don't have a problem with it, but I don't think it would work. But he has a critique of society as it exists. The problem is, and I think this is where the concept of centrists really comes into play, because centrists are this weird thing where they depict themselves as the norm, even when they're not.
Even when they aren't,
The ultimate centrist in British political discourse right now is obviously Keir Starmer.
Obviously,
and he's like the father of the centrist fathers. Like, he's the archetypal centrist dad. I think he even embraced it recently. But like, his views, his worldview, and his politics aren't actually middle of the road at all on a whole range of things. He's very autocratic. He's even in ways that are good, like occasionally, like even in the bits of his more progressive views, his abhorrence of certain like constitutional conventions. He's not middle of the road. He's not actually. It's a sort of pseudo. I'm trying to think of the word. It's kind of a sort of pseudo conservatism. It's projecting a sort of idea of themselves as serious, which is also at the same time like popular.
That's the language you get all the time, isn't it? They say, they talk of themselves as the rational side of politics, or the considered side of politics, when in fact very often all they really are a kind of like soft right, and not even always that soft either.
No, I think with Keir Starmer and a lot of the Labour right, they are generally, they kind of come from a sort of professional working class, very patriarchal tradition, and I think they're very, very autocratic in the way that they view the world. They don't trust people. They don't trust people to make the right choices, and they think that they can make better choices for people. They kind of see themselves as sort of mid-tier managers, but for the nation. And they're very unaware that people hate middle-tier managers.
Right. I mean, that's the irony, isn't it? They market themselves as the norm, as like the people who share like the pervasive political opinions across the spectrum, which is ironic because they're hated by everyone. By absolutely everyone.
Definitely dislike. I mean, like, as well as Labour are doing in their polls, if you look at the sort of finer detailing of the polling, it is certainly not because there's some like mass Starmer mania or anything like that.
No, it's people sort of making the best of a very, very, very dark situation, isn't it? Latching onto whatever alternative is there. It's not because Starmer is liked or good. It's because the alternatives are just so dystopically bad.
I mean, it really does take like Tories being as just ridiculously monstrous as they are now for someone like Starmer to even begin to touch anything like charisma. And there's a thing like in Weber's sociology that I quite like, where Weber says like people misunderstand the notion of charisma, because charisma isn't really about some like innate thing about the person. Charisma is also a social situation. If somebody is like born into a position where they're seen as the the inheritor of a cult or some kind of manifest destiny, they might be the most unlikable, stilted person in existence. They still have charisma because they have that ability to wield that sense of themselves to control other people through loyalty. And like, the charisma that Keir Starmer has is just entirely circumstantial. There's just nothing inherent to him that is charismatic or particularly inspiring.
Totally not. No, I mean, it's very difficult to think of the man as any kind of icon, isn't it? Or even as like a figure in politics. He's just a functionary.
He very much is, and I think like he's kind of self-embraced that like he is I think he sees that as something kind of noble. Like he is the person that is going to, like the adult in the room stuff, like as kind of silly as it is. I mean, it's only possible to even talk in that way when you're set against somebody like as patently ridiculous as Boris Johnson.
Right.
And quite frankly, when the standards are that low, like Mr. Blobby would be the adult in the room, a room with him and Boris Johnson.
Yeah, and in fact, any of the figures on the right in British politics, right, all of them are so grotesquely absurd that you need any cartoon character would be preferable.
You're up against like Suella Braverman, and I mean, even Rishi Sunak is only kind of not so much that because he is so diminishing. He virtually isn't anything at all. Like,
right, he just recesses, doesn't he? He just doesn't say anything. He just keeps stum.
And the only times he does, he's just a joke. I mean, like I always love the Coca-Cola thing where he was interviewed by those school pupils, and he was like, "I'm really into Coke," or something like that. Like, I love Coke. Like he's just a bit of an idiot. Really.
It's the notion that people don't understand either. The condescending notion that people don't understand that Tories are not like real people.
No, they don't exist in the same universe.
They don't exist in the same universe. They don't, they may as well, were it not for the fact that he takes it absolutely literally, they may as well be like David Icke, Nibiru, reptilian people, right? As a metaphor, it works really well.
They do seem from another planet, and that's because living in that sort of wealth, that kind of, it's not just having money, but it's having access to so much money and so many networks that you are essentially invulnerable. Like, even if, I mean, Rishi Sunak is so wealthy that he couldn't even imaginably go under. But even if somebody of that kind of social ilk does go under, their friends will immediately bail them out. They are essentially immune to the concerns of most people.
It's a game, isn't it? To them, it's like reality is a game. They could tank the whole country, which of course they are doing. They could tank the entire country, and it would not affect them massively.
I mean, it allows them to adopt just quite sociopathic strategies. I mean, the current strategy for dealing with inflation is clearly to increase unemployment. Like, that's what they're doing. They're trying to lower the bargaining power of workers by creating larger scale unemployment to reduce the spending power of most people. And they think that will. I mean, of course, this is completely unaware of the fact that inflation isn't being caused by increased income, because there hasn't been any increased income for a long time.
It's economic insanity.
So that they're going to do this for no real reason, for no real purpose, but it will still cause mass social misery, and it's just also a policy that is just insane. Like, you don't increase unemployment.
Right,
like, that's just not something.
Madness. It's absolute madness.
And it's deeply unhealthy to have a society where, like, it's even imaginable.
It's even a consideration, right? It's even
into positions of leadership.
It's
and so, like, and that's what Starmer's set against. So, like, the standards are so painfully. I mean, if he loses this next election, like, it is just like, it's beyond farce. Like if even he can manage to lose it, like, I don't see. At that point, I mean, what's the point of Labour even existing?
Well, at that point, I would have to say, what's the point of our political systems? They need to come down. Like, they need to be absolutely rebuilt and reconsidered from the assumptions up.
Sorry, my door just opened. I did get that. No, they do need to. Yeah, I mean, well, I'm generally of that view anyway. I mean, it is just.
Me too.
Yeah, I mean, I just don't see where we go from.
That would just be the absolute marker for me. That would be it. There would be literally nothing laudable, nothing worth saving. It may as well physically be brought to ashes.
No, I mean, this country is just in such a ruinous situation, and so much of it is of its own making. The victim of its own sort of nostalgia cult for empire. It's constantly the victim of its own evil.
constantly, its own abuses, its own hereditary abuses. It's amazing.
There is a kind of poetry in a really twisted, warped,
a really dark, very dark and gallows way, and I always say, were it only affecting those who are responsible, I'd be all for it. I'd be go for it. This is poetic. This is great, and the rest of us can sit around and watch,
But it's the least responsible who always suffer first and hardest. No, it's absolutely the way. And I when you were doing the Let's Play, I haven't actually been able to watch your Let's Plays as much as I'd like recently. But when you were doing the Let's Play of Victorian style, damn it, completely forgotten all of the names of every game I've played.
Bloodborne, not Bloodborne.
Yes, Bloodborne. Yes, Bloodborne. Yeah, when you're doing that, you were always sort of half joke about it being sort of like Brexit Britain, and it is like such a good metaphor. Like it is just Brexit.
It just feels like Britain. That. Yeah, it's Brexit Britain in COVID Britain. It's just it's so oddly.
Oh yeah, it's so apt for COVID.
I remember doing I'm on the 4th Let's Play of that game now, but I remember doing my Let's Play during COVID and saying, this is a mood. This game is absolutely a mood at this point.
100% is just clearly. I really hope they produce it. I won't go on to a discussion because there's not really much we want to have, but I hope they bring it out on PC eventually.
They must be. The outcry for more Bloodborne. It is like almost near as damn it a perfect game insofar as such a thing can happen. It's so. For me, it's top 3. It's easily top 3 ever made. It needs more people to access it. I want them to do. They need to do like a Demon's Souls style remake of it.
Yes, that would be amazing. I think if they do bring it out on PC, then that would be the perfect pretext for them to do that. And it would be amazing.
They need to do. They need to do it so that more people can play it, more people have access to it because it deserves it. More people deserve to play it. It is so beautiful. I love all of those games. I love Dark Souls. I love, Sekiro and whatnot. But for me, Bloodborne is the one.
I need to retry Sekiro. I didn't get into it as much as the other ones, mostly because the difficulty curve, even by the standards of this game, seemed very high.
Sekiro, I've played all of them through more than once, but Sekiro I haven't, and it's largely because of that. It is prohibitive in terms of the way it works.
I absolutely adored the latest one.
Oh, Elden Ring.
Yeah, actually, I'll just go on to my profile because I spent an absurd amount of time on it, and I think it is still my most ever played game now. In reality, I think Baldur's Gate 2 would be if I played that on Steam, but obviously the years I played that were pre-Steam. 311 hours. So that's
I can believe it. I can believe it.
Yeah. The next closest is The Binding of Isaac, which is obviously a game you play on your downtime more. So that's like 309 hours, so it's pretty close.
Elden Ring, it's one of those pieces of media that I look at and I play it and find myself thinking this cannot exist. This cannot exist. Like this kind of media alchemy where everything comes together and everything works so exquisitely. It's miraculous. It's a miracle. This game is it's almost too big. The success of it is too much to comprehend. I think it's a masterpiece. I really
had some amazing games in recent years, but I think it stands out. It does seem to stand out amongst them. Other games that really stand out. I'm just looking at my list now, but like Hollow Knight, I absolutely adored.
I loved Hollow Knight. I loved it. It's hard. It's an evil son of a bitch, that game. But I loved that. What got me about Hollow Knight more than anything was that wonderful juxtaposition between the art style and the ethos. So the art style's kind of cute. It's kind of cutesy. It's like Binding of Isaac. It's cute and sort of disturbing at the same time, but the ethos of it is entirely disturbing.
Yeah, absolutely. No, it really is. It's it's got this sort of it's got this sort of sense of dissonance sort of rooted in that allows for those moments in the game where you hit a new revelation or a new place and it just takes you away. Like it just is absolutely amazing. And it's all rooted in that dissonance, that kind of like you're constantly re-encountering just how often disturbing, enigmatic, and alien this world is.
Yeah,
because you're kind of always getting back into this place of comfort with the protagonists. And just going around the places and it's constantly able to recreate that like sense of oomph. Like
awe, right? When you unlock a new place which you didn't even know could exist. And it adds to the mythology in this very subtle, oblique way. I thought Hollow Knight was unambiguously successful. I thought it was a beautiful game. Same with Blasphemous,
I was going to mention Blasphemous because obviously same kind of platform game, the
Metroidvania,
Metroidvania, and that sense. I mean, they're just so perfect for that exploratory thing, and
that like, kind of storytelling, where there's like a very oblique mythology going on behind the scenes, and it's told in that very Dark Souls way, where everything is left open to the imagination and to interpretation. I mean, for me, the mythology of Blasphemous, I thought was stunning. I mean, absolutely stunning.
I am so excited for the sequel of that.
Me too.
Even the stuff they've already hinted at looks. I mean, they don't like. I mean, they shouldn't pull their punches because that's the whole thing with Blasphemous. They really don't like the Miracle now has a child. Like like it instantly is like, what the fuck does that do to this world?
Mean? What does that mean?
Like it's just and I mean also like the Miracle has a child is like because there's already so much of a sort of Spanish Catholicism being parodied, channeled, even homage to in Blasphemous, but like it's Jesus. Like the Miracle has like they're introducing Christ into this world,
and it makes sense, doesn't it? I mean, if the Grievous Miracle is like it's the Catholic notion of expiation, right? It's expiation made manifest in a mythology. Christ is the ultimate figure of that, the suffering martyr, right? The suffering Messiah, the Messiah of blood. It makes so much sense, and I cannot wait. I cannot wait.
I mean, it immediately sort of hints at some kind of perverse redemptive figure, but like what does redemption mean in a world where everyone needs and wants to suffer? Like what is the end telos of that is just like immediate. It's fascinating. I mean, I don't even need to speculate because there's just so much going on.
I mean, I don't know where it's going to go either. I mean, at the end of the last game, if you played it with all of the add-ons and all of, and you got the absolute ending, what's his name?
The penitent one.
The penitent one. He ends up like murdering the very manifestation of the Grievous Miracle at the end. So I don't know where it goes mythologically, but I'm dying to find out.
No, absolutely. It's really I mean, that's probably one of, if not my most anticipated game. Like it is just. I mean, I'm still very much anticipating the full release of Baldur's Gate 3, which I was actually getting cynical about, but apparently it is coming.
It is by all accounts. It is
chipping away at it.
They are working at it. I mean, there's a couple on the PlayStation Store I want to play at the moment. There's the new Amnesia, the Bunker, which I let's played all of those games, the Amnesia games, and they are apex horror. They are so good.
Really enjoyed your Let's Plays of those. Actually, I'd definitely sort of try and find time for that because I really enjoyed.
They're so beautiful. I mean, and their sister game Soma, of course, which is the science fiction one, which also was absolutely stunning. And there's also the remake of Layers of Fear.
Oh right, that I know there's a lot of criticism of it, and
is of the remake
of the original, and I just don't have time for that. I just really
loved the original.
But I'm a huge fan of so-called walking simulators. Like I like them. I know a lot of people just I mean, there's this whole really inane debate of whether or not they're games, and to
Oh.
that, I'm like, I don't mind if
I
they're
don't
not
care.
games. Like, if they're not games, then so be it. Whatever they
I-
are is working.
Whatever they are is great. I
Yeah.
mean, it's for me, it's an inane question. It's a totally
Yeah.
inane question. I
Exactly,
think
it doesn't help you understand anything. It doesn't
No.
add to your interpretation of anything.
no, and I will say,
yeah.
I mean, my experience of Layers of Fear was that it's one of the best horror games I've ever played.
No, I loved it. I actually got the VR version of it and tried to play that. But it made me.
No.
It was difficult. Like,
Yeah.
like just as an emotional experience
But-
being in that game in that way, but also like it was very disorientating. I actually got very car sick very quickly playing Layers of Fear, because there's so much weird sensory stuff going on. You just start to feel like I felt really physically sick after playing it for not a long period of time.
That's the VR helmet. I mean, I played Resi 7 on the VR helmet, and I mean that's a different species of horror to Layers of Fear. You don't have the sort of like existential horror where the reality warps and whatnot. But even that was so. There was something about it that it's almost ineffable, the effect that it had, but it made me so tense and so afraid, so full of dread that
there's a kind of like nervous anxiety. Even just playing it without like the VR, to be honest. So like, and it does have an effect. Like the VR is definitely anxiety inducing.
Oh, definitely. I mean, it's that weird thing. I've always described it as it turns off that part of your brain that acknowledges the screen. So you somehow it's not video game horror anymore that you're feeling. It's not that sort of that was fun, that thrill, that almost like roller coaster thrill that you get with video games, or even like that wonderful sense of dread that relates to media. It feels real.
No, you're fully there, and it's just and it's a slightly disturbing thing.
I remember I came when I was playing Resi 7, I played it on the VR around my friend's house because they loved watching me play it. I can't imagine why. And I remember getting to the top of the stairs at the top of the basement in the house in Resi 7 and looking down the steps at the dark door at the bottom and just going, I am not going down there. No.
Yeah. Like it becomes more of a question that you're actually asking yourself rather than the character you're playing. And like, and the answer is like, it's like what people intuitively always say about horror films. Like no one would act like that. No one would do that thing. No one would like, do you want to separate? We know that there's an evil monster that's like 8 feet tall and has like a brutal axe that he's just used in front of you on somebody you know and care about. Like, like, do you want to separate? The answer is just no. Obviously not.
Obviously.
Like, no one would separate. Like,
No
even
one
if
would
it
do
was
that,
a good
right?
idea, no one would.
Do you want to go upstairs in the house where you know the monster is, or do you want to go out the front door? You want to go out the front door, don't you?
And end the film. Like, you would do anything to end the film as immediately as you can. Like,
it's a strange feeling. I've never had it before with a piece of horror media. I've never had it before where you really don't want to progress. You don't want to go down the stairs. You don't want to continue the game. It's making you reluctant to play.
Yeah, which is interesting, but not conducive to the game's own logic.
Right, to the whole medium. I mean, it's a fascinating thing for a game to do. Don't get me wrong. I mean, for a piece of horror media to do that to you, where you are reluctant to engage with it, it's so frightening.
And there are some games that do incorporate that within themselves, but they like. I mean, even non-VR game. I mean, I'm thinking especially of Darkwood, because Darkwood's whole thing is like, it's actually trying to make you not to want to progress, and then the way it tricks you is the way you progress is to not to want to progress. Like the way you progress through that game is just one necessity after another. Running away from the horror is how you progress the game. It's
how you do it, and it's one of those wonderful pieces of media, Darkwood, that feels tainted. Like the medium itself, the game feels tainted. It feels like there's something evil in it. Like it's coming out at you. It's diseased, and you're going to catch it for playing it.
I mean, it's there thematically and in terms of the content in like these notions. I mean, fungus is like everywhere in Darkwood.
Yeah.
Like there's this kind of notion of fungal infestation.
Yeah.
And also like fungal infestation you also have to use, because this is something that is both the source of the corruption, but also the only means to survival within that world. So you're kind of in this unwinnable situation where you have to kind of integrate into the very thing that's corrupting and is making the world unlivable. It's such a good example.
I mean, it's so beautiful. Darkwood is one I will be evangelistic about because I think it's beautiful. I think it's one of the best horror games I've ever played. And that element of the unknown that I love, where it's random every time you play it, so it changes whenever you play it. You can't like map it out because the map changes. But the fact that you don't really know what's going to happen every night, there's always a random chance that you're going to get one of the really, really abstruse scenarios that is like, what's going on?
Because it's chance based, I think that can even happen on like the first night. You can have like the first night and you will be invaded by like a demonic ghost figure that will just kill you, and you have no chance.
Nope.
And like that's just kind of an amazing thing for a game. I mean, it takes that sort of Dark Souls level of unfairness and just elevates it into an art. Like it is so consciously unfair, and that's so integrated into what it's about.
It's thematic, right? It's part. This is what it is. It's almost like a despair simulator. It's like what was that one I played? Pathologic. Holy moly! I mean, I probably will never play that game again. But Pathologic 2, that may have been one of the best video games I've ever played. That's also in the top 3. That's up there with Bloodborne. I mean, it's horrible. And it physically hurts to play. Physically hurts to play.
I haven't actually been able to finish it, but that sense of just I mean, it's very similar to Darkwood. That sense of that you're just trudging through this, like you're just desperately trying to get to the next thing, and your reward is that you'll be able to desperately try to get something after that.
More desperation. I love the way the game deliberately fucks you over at every turn. Like you just about master the economies of the town by like the 3rd day, and then it all changes. The economies collapse because the military comes in, and then suddenly everything that you thought you knew is upended. So suddenly the characters that were selling food aren't selling it anymore. The shops, they don't take your money anymore. You've got it's so.
It makes a mockery of your attempts to plan. Like it invites you to plan and to be intelligent, and then it's like, you thought that would make a difference? No.
If you want to talk about despair simulators, that game, and there's so much in it. That's what I love about Pathologic. You can follow paths through that game, and you will get a completely different outcome every single time. I think it is one of the most beautiful examples of the medium I've ever come across.
It always used to be the promise of games that they would do that, and like even games I love. I mean, Baldur's Gate 2 is still like it's one of those defining games for me because it is the game I grew up with, and it's also just an amazing game. Like
it's great.
It's a really good game. But like even with games like Baldur's Gate 2, the promise of making your own narrative was just something they just couldn't functionally manage. Like it was just beyond the capacities of games. But now we've got games like Darkwood, like and Disco Elysium also fits into that plan. Although Disco Elysium has much more of a core story integrated into it because of the way that it's a game. Basically, it kind of tricks you because you come into it and it's like, create your characters. Like, this is standard RPG. I create my character and then I play the game. But it actually turns out that character creation isn't really the character creation. No. The character creation is the whole game. The whole game is about
that's what it's about, right?
Character.
It's about creating Harry from the ground up based on your decisions, what you say, what you do, how you interact with people. And so every experience is different. It's really, I mean, again, Disco Elysium, it's right up there. It's up there. I think it's a masterpiece.
Yeah, no, it is. And it's so profound that, like, depending upon how you play the game, the genre of the game changes. You play that game in a way where it is like from beginning to end, it can be a slapstick comedy of just like errors and pitfalls and scatological humor, and it's just like the silliest, most ridiculous thing. You can also play that game in a more like noir detective, like self-serious way, where like there's virtually no humor, where it is like there's always a little humor because of the satirical elements of the world around you, but you can play it in a way that it's more like ploddingly, tragically sad, where it's more like brutal, and you can play it more action orientated, where you're just like this kind of thug, kind of
Mhm.
pushing your way through the world, one punch at a time. And that's just amazing. It's amazing to
Yeah.
play a game where it's not only adaptive to your choices, but the registers of the game itself alters to your choices. I think that's an incredible thing.
I
from a
honestly,
Cartouche.
it's one of those games where whenever I engage with it, I find something that awes me.
Mm.
Like whether it's the writing, the voice acting, all of which is stunning. It's absolutely superb.
And especially now, every character and every line is acted, so
and
it's
so
just, like,
well acted as well. All the like the voices of your internal workings.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, just
right from the beginning, right from that moment you wake up, and there's that whole internal conversation between all the different aspects of yourself.
Oh,
I mean, like, that's like Jungian in the best way. That
Yeah,
kind of
yeah, yeah.
idea of people as a multiplicity, like the idea that, like, the ego is only just one aspect of the
Yes.
self, and you've got all of these other aspects of the self that are just as important, that have their own narrative trajectories,
Yep.
even, and their own needs, and like anything that manifests is manifesting for a reason.
yeah.
And you just get that right throughout Disco Elysium. The complexity of this character, who on the surface is this pretty simple character.
Almost archetype, right? Almost like from the beginning, he's almost an archetype. But then, actually, when because you have access to his interiority, which you often don't with those characters, suddenly you see that it's just not the case, right?
Yeah, no, it is just incredible. And I mean, I'm always going with my game where I can get an achievement called, is it like Communism Builder or something like that?
Yes,
Like, oh, I'd actually played the game as a communist is just hilarious. Like, yeah, there's some stuff in that that's just, but it's also like it's one of the few games where I'll play it as like a reactionary, because it's just as funny. It is not indeed actually a particularly reactionary version of playing as a reactionary, because it's just constantly lampooning that.
Of course.
Like, but it is just hilarious. Oh yeah, Badless. I really like getting this one. Baddest hustler in the neoliberal hood. That's great. The world's most laughable centrist as well is an actual achievement.
Brilliant.
Like all of these are just brilliant. Like I mean, some of the best named achievements ever.
Yeah. I want to give hand Keir Starmer a badge that has that achievement on it.
That would be genuinely great, actually, to like just give him that. Yeah, he is that character.
Well done, sir. Well done.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, and playing Disco Elysium as a centrist is really funny as well, because you're just so completely at odds with the universe around you, of all of these extreme ideologies.
Yeah.
I mean, it's also like, because Kim is kind of that in a surface reading, although there's a lot more actually going on. Yeah. But if you play it that way, from my memory, like even Kim is like a bit like how can you be an idealist for lacking ideals?
Yes,
When you're causing Kim to like doubt his centrism, because but
because
that's the brilliant thing of the character, because he's Kim and Harry are essentially it's Don Quixote and what's Don Quixote's site? Sancho Panza. Sancho. Yeah. And like the whole thing with Harry is he can take on all these ideologies, but he always he believes them too much. No matter what you play him as a communist, as a centrist, even as a fascist or as a capitalist, it's like it's a ridiculous form of whatever he's doing.
Yeah. It's exaggerated to the nth degree, because it consumes him, doesn't it? Like he surrenders, he surrenders all identity to whatever he is and what he's doing.
Yeah, exactly, because he is basically Don Quixote, and that's what Don Quixote does. He play acts to a point, to a fault. Like,
it's that whole thing. I mean, it's that wonderful setup of the game as well, where of course he has amnesia. He doesn't know who he is, so he's a blank slate. He's a tabula rasa, right? So whatever he encounters and whatever you make him do, that's what he is. That's how he identifies.
And there's a brilliant like nuance to that whole amnesia thing, because like there are some versions of playing the game where he leans into that more,
Mhm.
where you kind of start to doubt that he does actually have amnesia.
Yes.
Like there are versions where you don't really center on that, and it just becomes an incidental background detail to the character. But there are like versions where you'll really go into like the amnesic cop as like a cliche.
Oh yeah, he'll
where
say
it's
it
like
to people. He'll say it to everyone. There is
Yeah,
the
yeah,
option,
yeah.
you know, and that
Yeah.
option comes up more the more you say it. You know,
yeah.
oh, I don't know who I am. I have amnesia. I don't know who I
Yeah,
am.
yeah.
Do you know who I am? He'll start asking people, "Do you know who I am?"
Mm.
And Kim will look at you disapprovingly, obviously, as he does. You know.
Who's the capitalist woman on the boat, the sort of Thatcherite
Oh, I
type?
love her. Yes, she's the one that you get all the metaphysics from, isn't she? Who
Yeah,
explains
yeah,
about
yeah.
like the sort of grey nowhere between the islands.
Yes, yeah.
Oh, I can't remember her name, but she's wonderful. Even though she is a Thatcher sort of figure, she's a really cool character.
I mean, they don't like they always make the characters beguiling, like no matter what ideology. I mean, I shouldn't say that. There's certain fascist characters that are just like brutally stupid. Like
Yes,
that's the whole point. But like
but they are often intriguing, aren't they?
Yeah,
They're often intriguing. I mean, the guy on the bridge who won't let you by, who's like a total racial supremacist.
Yeah. I mean, he's fascinating because he's a racial supremacist from a subjugated group who's kind of like inverted the racial supremacies. So he is sort of this. I mean, again, he's like that. Everybody is kind of. You never know how much anybody really believes anything they say, because the only character you feel like is genuine, which is weird because everything is pretense with him, is Harry. Harry just believes. Like that's all he does. He's like a sponge for belief. Like he just accepts and believes with absolute conviction anything of. He's actually reminds me a little of Homer Simpson in that way, because that's the quality that Homer has in The Simpsons, and it's what drives his comedy. Like he just believes anything. But everyone else, there's always, with the complex exception of Kim, because there's just so much weird going on with Kim.
Yeah.
But they seem to like have adopted positions that they don't really like. There's a kind of level of cynicism to it. So the capitalist doesn't really seem to actually believe in capitalism, and the union boss doesn't really seem to believe in anything.
No,
like
everyone's like corrupt, aren't they? You know, they like they have a surface proclamation of ideological position, but that what they do and the way they act undercuts it.
Yeah, it undercuts it, and it also seems like it is like almost self-consciously just a persona, and if you believe in it, and this is why they all kind of treat Harry as a fool, because Harry disturbs them as somebody who actually takes all of the ideological gruff in this society seriously. That's like the one thing you're not supposed to do, and that either awes or offends or disturbs or makes Harry a figure of mockery, depending on who you're talking to. Like it's never like just accepted.
No, no, definitely not.
Yeah, I mean, I won't talk about the ending because there's a good chance people
absolutely
haven't heard it. But there's an element to that, to like the final encounter of like Harry's belief as against the world that is just like really profound. And yeah, I mean, it's not a particular surprise that I love this game, because I think most lefties do. But also, I have a great affection for Don Quixote, and this is Don Quixote in my view. I mean,
absolutely. I think it's all, it's one of the core texts for understanding this game. There's a lot, by the way. It's a very literate game.
Oh, absolutely.
It's a literate text, isn't it? I mean, you could write theses on Disco Elysium, and I'm sure it's been done. But Don Quixote is probably like the core text.
Yeah, its narrative sensibility, I should say, is I mean, there's a lot else going on in terms of references but it's got that fundamental narrative. I mean, Don Quixote is in DNA of so much narrative in modernity, because it is the original modern novel in many ways.
Yeah, it's an text, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's like Frankenstein, right? You actually can't engage with literature without engaging with Don Quixote.
Yeah, it just comes up again and again and again. And that whole thing of like, you've got the manic believer and his sidekick, who is more straight-laced and principally exists for that manic believer to have somebody who believes in love in some way.
Absolutely. I mean, bringing it right back to the very beginning of the conversation, there are Don Quixote archetypes all the way through Warhammer 40,000, of course.
Oh, yeah.
Very explicitly at times as well. I mean,
actually, I mentioned Gazgul, but like
Gazgul and Makari, right?
Yeah, they are Don Quixote, and I mean, actually, because it's even like said by Gazgul that he isn't special. It was just his sheer self-belief that called out to Gork and Mor. Like, yeah, like I mean, the orcs are so fit for that kind of narrative because they're all about self-belief.
There is there's a Necron overlord, a Necron character called Nemesaur Zandrek, I believe his name. Is it Nemesaur Zandrek? He is Don Quixote. So he's woken up from the eons long slumber of the Necrons, and his engrams are so corrupted that he still thinks that he's engaged in the political wars of the Necron race. So when he's fighting Eldari, or when he's fighting orcs, he's seeing other Necrons, or Necrontyre rather, and he's got a bodyguard called Vargard Oberon who keeps him anchored, keeps him safe, makes sure that any attempts on his life or on his power don't take place, and sort of very subtly directs him down the saner paths. You know, he is Don Quixote.
I like this opening of the Warhammer 40k fandom description. Whilst possessing a grand and calculating military genius, many among the Necron nobility believe that Zandrek does not grasp reality as it really truly is.
Yeah.
Yes. Many thought that his mind suffered damage during the Necron's great sleep, and as a consequence, that's brilliant. That's such a fantastic way of taking a Necron.
Oh, it's brilliant. I mean, character-wise, it works really well. I mean, actually, one you must read. I've just finished reading The Infinite and the Divine, which is a Black Library novel that involves two of the key Necron characters, Orican the Divine and Trazyn the Infinite, and it's a scream. It's so funny. It's taken. I mean, the writing is sublime. It's taken one of the most dour and gallows and sort of moribund races in the 40k universe, and made its immortality a basis for incredible humor. So these two hate one another. Trazyn the Infinite and Orican the Diviner. They are engaged in this eons-long conflict of conflicting ideologies, and they are they're petty.
I know more about Trazyn than the other one, but
Orican, it's so funny. I mean, I have not laughed out loud so much at a piece of work for a long time. There's a sequence where, because their conflict is like bringing the entire Necron race into problems, they're summoned by this Necron ruling court to stand trial. And whilst they're standing trial, it's taking place, because of course they're immortal, it's taking place over a period of eons. This court trial is taking place over thousands of years, and they are basically doing the Necron equivalent of texting one another, and they're swearing at one another. It's the funniest thing. I just could not get over how hilarious this piece of work was, and using the 40k setting for that as a basis for comedy and making it fit as well, making it sincerely part of the universe and part of that race as well, the Necrons. I just thought it was brilliant.
That is, I'm going to get that on Audible because I think that would be a good one.
I mean, really worth it. I couldn't stop reading it. It's so light and so well written. For my money, I think Trazyn. I love Trazyn the Infinite. I think he's a fantastic character.
From what I've seen of him, he does seem just really brilliant. I like his wryness, and I like his There's a sense of him from what I've seen that he's not particularly loyal to the Necrons. He's got his own game. He doesn't really give. Yeah, he sees the whole thing as a kind of joke. The Necrons are kind of a joke to him. Yeah.
He's got his own agendas far outside the Necron Empire and the Necron race, and he's very like Fabius Bile. He regards most of those around him as kind of petty.
Has he interacted with Fabius Bile? Because
he has, yes. Right. Yeah. There's at the end of the first Fabius Bile book by Josh Reynolds, which I believe is called Manflayer, I believe, or that could be the second one. Fabius ends up on Trazyn's museum world, and they do talk. They do talk, and they do. They're not. It's not like what you'd expect. They don't immediately launch into hostilities and whatnot. They actually do come to some degree of accord. They kind of recognize in one another. Oh my God, here's a sane person in this universe I can actually talk to.
I can imagine that. I mean, weirdly, they are kind of within the scope of that universe sane. Like they don't, like, a lot of what they want to do is just not see the destruction of everything of value.
No,
and whilst their means of doing that are brutal and awful, like that's in the scope of Warhammer 40,000.
Yeah.
Where the means of doing anything is.
I always say, with regards to Fabius, it's emblematic of just how extreme the Warhammer 40,000 universe is and how absurd that it makes you kind of get on side with the ultimate eugenicist. This guy who makes Mengele look like he's dissecting frogs in a high school science room.
Absolutely, no. He's I mean, he is that, and and other figures a bit like that. I mean, in a way, with I'm trying to think of the name of the guy, the lieutenant for Mortarion.
Typhus.
Typhus, yeah. I mean, he's playing a very similar game as well in terms of his ideals. Like, he ostensibly is loyal to Nurgle, but I don't really think he is. I think he's trying to forge a path through.
Yeah. He does feel that way, Typhus. He feels like he doesn't accept any kind of authority, full stop. Yeah. And Nurgle's kind of a means to an end,
He's got a kind of utopian agenda again, like Fabius, that is in some ways like a sort of grim shadow of the Emperor's. That's Fabius. Fabius is basically the Emperor failed. Humanity wasn't up to the job. We need a new humanity.
We need a new humanity, right? I mean, it's almost obvious, right? It's almost an obvious solution in its own peculiar way. Ahriman is the same. Ahriman is a utopian like Fabius is, but he's coming at it from the opposite angle. So Fabius wants to create a new humanity so that the warp becomes becalmed and chaos dies, and humanity is then removed from the dominion of gods and demons and angels and whatnot. Ahriman comes at it from the other angle. He comes at it from the angle of metaphysics. So he is of the opinion that humanity can still master the warp and use chaos and reshape it according to humanity's designs,
Yeah. I mean, basically, they both start from the position of the Emperor's idea that you could just live alongside it, and hostility to it is just ridiculous.
Doesn't work.
Yeah.
It's one or the other. You've either got to harness it or you've got to become it. Undo it effectively. Those are your choices. And
it's weird. He is obviously depicted as a villain, Fabius, but Fabius's intentions there, I get the sense that the Tau leadership are essentially doing exactly the same thing as Fabius, right? They're just engineering the Tau to be less and less warp sensitive, and then they're going to deal with the other races in a similar eugenicist way in order to deal with the warp. They know about. They're definitely the Eternals. They definitely know about the warp and chaos and demons and everything.
Yes,
and they're just well, how do we deal with this? Obviously, we've seen all these other races not deal with it particularly well.
Deal with it really badly and cataclysmically for the most part.
I mean, then there's that pet theory of some people that the Tyranids might actually be the Great Old One's solution to the warp.
It's
send in a cleansing force to just erase all life and then start from fresh without the warp.
Kind of makes sense. It really does. As a theory, it's probably the one that holds the most water, to be honest, because it's what they are by their very nature.
It's also not like the ancient old ones had any more scruples about doing anything either.
But clearly, I mean, clearly they engineered the entire Eldari race just to fight the Necrons, right? Yeah. They don't have any scruples whatsoever. They don't.
And
care.
They created the orcs as well, didn't they? For the same. Was it the same purpose? Or
it's one of the theories. Yes, it's almost like the orcs are like the proto Tyranids in a weird kind of way. That's one of the theories, anyway.
That's quite funny, actually. I quite like that. The Orcs is a kind of failed test drive for the Tyranids.
It didn't work out.
Yeah.
how they wanted. In fact, it just created another warp-sensitive race and
Yeah,
ended up
yeah.
creating 2 new gods. So well done.
Yes.
You know, well done there.
Is there a sense of like, because Gork and Mork's ontology, like their actual existence, is kind of always very, I guess, like everything with the Orcs, it's always very odd. Like,
Yeah.
Yeah.
You
Like,
don't see them as active agents in the same way you do the Chaos Gods. Like the
Yeah,
Chaos Gods
yeah.
absolutely exist. They are like sentient creatures within the warp. But
it's
Walk,
also-
Gork,
yeah. It's
Hard to
also
say.
quite clear that the Eldari gods did exist as
Yes.
sentient creatures within the war.
Oh,
and
absolutely.
One or two of them are still around.
Yeah,
albeit,
Kegarak,
like,
the Laughing
yeah,
God,
yeah.
Gila Menshokane in bits, obviously, is the
Yeah,
Avatar, and the God of the Dead, whose name I can't remember off the top of my
Also,
head.
there's the god that's the prisoner of Nurgle, who allegedly.
Oh, Aisha, yes,
Yeah.
the mother,
yeah.
yes, Aisha, the mother goddess. Yeah, that's right.
So they Gork and Mork don't see, I mean, like, you never see Chaos Gods interacting with Gork and Mork, or even acknowledging them, to be honest. Like, they don't have any awareness of them.
No, they don't. It's not like Age of Sigmar where they interact with like the Horned Rat and all the other gods. Actually, they kind of do, because Age of Sigmar is like an interplay of godly figures, isn't it? That's kind of the point. But no, the gods in Warhammer 40,000 are really interesting because a lot of them are really diffuse, and it's their existence or their natures it's hard to pinpoint. Like, where are they in the warp? You know, what portion of the warp do they occupy? Because, you know, they do. The Orcs do stir the warp in the same way humanity does, probably to an even greater degree.
Well, that's the whole thing with the Warg, because it's like this kind of collective unconscious. I mean, that does actually feed into the idea of them being proto-Tyranids. Because
it kind of does, yeah.
Because, like, the Tyranids are just doing that, but on a more sophisticated, more alien level.
That's right, where it's not like stirred by emotion. It's like a nullity.
Yeah,
it's an emptiness. It's lacking in all the drives and the abstractions that make the warp what it is, that stir it to become gods. It actually just becomes it.
I mean, also that, and the way that the Orcs are inherently resistant to chaos influences because of their, like, inbuilt Orcish supremacy.
Yes.
Like, apparently, like, Orcs do, like, become like Khornites, but when they become Khornites, other Orcs recognize them as not behaving Orcy enough, and they just kill them.
They just
don't get any stranglehold at all.
It's interesting because Khorne does like the Orcs. There is a story in like one of the demon codices of late where some orcs somehow find their way into the realm of Khorne, you know, and he likes them so much because they love fighting that he just keeps endlessly resurrecting them so they can keep fighting again and again and again and again and again.
And that's like almost certainly paradise for an orc. Like,
the realm of Khorne. Like, think so, wouldn't you?
Yeah. Also, I imagine it would also make them pretty terrifying because orcs get stronger the more they fight.
Right.
The more they suffer. So like those orcs are probably pretty frightening orcs. I mean,
you'd think they'd be like greater demon style orcs by this point.
You got like a conception of like a legion of Ghazghkuls or something.
Something like that.
Although Ghazghkul kind of explicitly frames himself as like not exceptional, but as how all orcs should be.
Yes, he's the archetype of what orcs supposed to be, isn't he? He's the most orky orc.
Yeah. But he's very much like the rest of you are disappointing. You're not me. I'm gonna forge you into me. Like that's the utopian project. Like
he's almost like the emperor, isn't he? He's like the emperor for orcs.
That's a fantastic notion, and I just really like an orc to say that to an inquisitor or something. Like,
God, what can you imagine? Wow.
Like a full-on like existential meltdown.
Yeah, that is not going to go down well. And you don't really want to piss an inquisitor off, to be honest.
They are temperamental. I do like that they've led it more into that as a narrative thing. That like the inquisitors are like children.
Oh, they're really eccentric. They're really interesting. Like every Inquisitor character in the novels and the background, they're very high strung. They're very temperamental and oddly unpredictable.
Yes. Yeah. That's exactly it. Like they're just kind of.
There's like a mindset that leads you to become an Inquisitor, and it just gets worse and worse and worse the more you encounter and the more you do.
Yes, that's exactly it. Like there's. I think the overwhelming sense is that it's not good for your personality to
really
be one.
not. No.
I mean, like,
or your sense of like scope or scale or anything like that.
I mean, that's the whole story of Eisenhorn, right? Is it Eisenhorn?
Eisenhorn is
like
there's been a few that have really gone off the deep end. Eisenhorn, Jack Draco.
Yeah.
They've all.
I mean,
gone
his
off
whole thing is like he begins as an ultra loyalist, like a true believer in the Imperial truth, and then ends like assaulting with chaos possessed and stuff and is like one of the most heretical when it comes to working with aliens. He's like, yeah, whatever works.
It's a slippery slope, isn't it?
Yeah.
The minute you go down that radical inquisitor, you're done. You are on a very, very slippery slope towards chaos. Then
at the same time, like, how can you not? Because of what humanity is arrayed against. Like, it is also like remaining a loyalist is its own kind of insanity.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I've always said if I found myself in the Warhammer 40,000 universe tomorrow, I would declare for Slaanesh. That's it. That's it. At the very least, you would enjoy whatever comes your way. You know.
I mean, that's the great premise of all of the Chaos Gods, because their servants are so enamored with the single-minded facet of reality that they become.
Yeah.
That, like, no matter how horrible it is, like even in like the most despairing guises of Nurgle, it's a despair that's self-cultivated and is almost enjoyed.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, like part of their gift is they alter your state of mind and your perceptions. It takes a long time, by all accounts, and can be absolutely horrific, especially with Nurgle. I mean, my God, the stuff you've got to go through.
Yeah.
But when you come out the other side, there is a utopian element to it. You enjoy what you're doing. You enjoy what you are. In fact, you more than enjoy it. You occupy an ideal of yourself.
Yeah. It's ecstatic. It's not just it's not just simple enjoyment. There's a religious ecstasy to it.
Totally. I mean, the only one that doesn't really have that is Tzeentch, because Tzeentch operates in a different way. His servants operate in a very, very different way to all the other chaos powers. In fact, a lot of Tzeentch's servants don't even know they are servants of Tzeentch, because it doesn't work that way, you know.
Well, the god of duplicity is going to be, duplicitous all the way down.
Exactly that. Yeah. But I mean, Slaanesh, when the thing with Slaanesh is that gradual escalation. So you can start off as like taking joy in your art or taking joy in something very simple, but it just becomes more and more and more extreme. And that's one of the very clever ways they've subtly rewritten Slaanesh in recent years. He's not like a god of any specific desire or behavior anymore.
Just obsession per se.
Obsession, extremes. That's what Slaanesh is about. And it's really clever. It works really, really well. It makes the god much more interesting, much more various. It makes his servants much more various. Because they can be anything. They can be anything.
They can be musicians and poets and admirals who become obsessed with admiralty. Like there's literally no limit to it.
There is no. That's the whole thing with Slaanesh. There are no limitations, and that's what it's about. It's about violating every limitation that comes your way, to the point whereby you kind of lose yourself. The servants of Slaanesh, they love everything they experience, and I mean everything. There is nothing that is not joyous to the servants of Slaanesh. And it makes them really problematic when Inquisitors come up against them.
Yes, because you can't really torture a Slaaneshi devotee.
What do you do? Because they like everything.
I mean, I would imagine like both Slaanesh and Tzeentch would find a peculiar kind of perverse joy in the Inquisition, because in different ways the Inquisition is both obsessive and to the point to a fault, and also like veiled in subterfuge and schemes and plots. Like, those are both aspects that there's massive overlap
there. Well, with that, I've got to call this to
I should
a halt. But again, it's as always, it was lovely to catch up. I'm so sorry that it's taken us so long.
No, it's absolutely. I've been just ridiculously busy.
Likewise, the first quarter of this year has been mad. It has. It's been the busiest period.
No, absolutely.
But no, it's been lovely. It's been really, really nice.
Likewise, likewise. Always
And
good to talk.
no, we must do it again. What would you like to? What I've wanted to ask is, would you like to come and do a another Lovecraft retrospective?
Yes, that would be. Actually, it's been a while since I've read Lovecraft, so I'll have a think about what to do, because I think we had discussions previously about potential ones. But I definitely want to reappraise them.
Fabulous. I mean,
that would be great. Yeah,
I've been talking to Jack Graham about doing one as well, because he really loves Lovecraft. So I don't know, maybe we could do one. All three of us could do one at some point.
That'd be fantastic. I don't think I've actually done a podcast with Jack Graham.
Have you not?
I think there's been talks before, like it just never materialized.
Oh, Jack's
superb.
Really,
I've always enjoyed listening to
amazing guy. I mean, amazing.
No, absolutely. Yeah.
So that will be. I'll have a chat to Jack, and we'll see what we can put together.
Yeah, but I mean, if it also involves Jack, like if he has a strong preference, I'd be up for pretty much any. I mean, Lovecraft is. I mean, even in the things I don't like about his stuff, there's plenty interesting to be said.
Yeah, absolutely. It's always fruitful. Yeah. It's always fruitful.
Yeah, absolutely.
Before we go, is there anything that you'd like to pimp out?
Probably just my website, and I'm mostly steering clear of social media these days. A little Facebook, but I'm not going to advertise my Facebook page because that's just weird.
Yeah.
Rowantree-editing.uk. If you go on that, that's my blog is on there. I'm just trying to get active again with that. I've been having a bit of a break from it, but I've just got a piece on Cormac McCarthy's The Passenger, which is a fantastic novel. And it's really sad it's now his last, I believe.
Of course. Yeah, of course.
But yeah, that's pretty much everything is there. And if you're in need of editing, all my information as a freelance editor is up there too. So yeah. Excellent.
And I can personally attest to that because Rowan edited Essential Atrocities.
I really enjoyed doing that,
which was fantastic. It was great. Oh, thank you so much. That was wonderful. You made it like, as all the editors I've ever had have done. You've made it more than it would have been otherwise, which was really wonderful. No, you did. Links to all that below, by the way, ladies and gents. As for myself, the usual, you can find me knocking about here on Exaggerated Elegy. Links to all of my published fiction, including Essential Atrocities, over at strangeplaygrounds.com, or if you go on to the Evil Empire of Amazon and just type in George Daniel Lee, you'll find all of my short story collections up there. And if you fancy chatting at all, you can come and chat to me over on Twitter at Enigmatic Elegy. Rowan, thanks again. That absolutely wonderful.
Thank you. It's really good just to talk, and I like these more unstructured conversations.
Me too.
I think Warhammer has been the presiding theme, but it's been
it's on my mind. I can't help it. 10th edition's coming up. It's on my mind.
They have just released it, and that new box set does look. I've looked at it a few times during this call, and it looks beautiful.
Oh, it's so good.
Yeah.
So good. Honestly,
the temptation with me is like if I get that and add it to my previous box set, which I haven't even opened, then I've got like a full army just there that looks quite interesting. And there's also, I mean, I've obviously done this intentionally, but if you combine those two box sets, you've got quite a nicely shaped army.
Yeah, quite a hefty units. Space Marine army going on there.
Yeah. It's a temptation. My fear is the new Tyranid models are so beautiful. I might just start collecting those as well.
Oh, honestly, they're good. They're good. It's ridiculous. It really is. And I can't start down that route. It would be just awful. I would drown in plastic. There'd be no room for anyone or anything.
I could imagine. Given your my love of like Lovecraftian stuff, like the Tyranids are a real potential.
Oh god, monsters, big gribbly Gigerian alien monsters,
and it's that incomprehensibility of them that's so like such a draw with the
so appealing. And the fact that the models are now getting like so good that they're echoing
Yeah.
that horror element, that cosmic horror element. It's like,
Yeah.
oh dear God.
You look at them
Not-
and they're like, there's a sense of intelligence there, but you have
Yeah.
no comprehension of what kind of intelligence or what's
is.
actually going on. Yeah.
Absolutely. Do not go and look at the new Death Leaper, because you will want it. It's absurd. It's honestly absurd. Right, with that, I'm going to call this to a close. Thank you once again, and thank you guys for listening. This has been an absolute pleasure. Until next time, bye-bye.
Bye.